إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل له فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي زدني علما
آمين.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته brother.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. كيف
All
حالك
right.
حبيبي؟
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah.
الحمد لله.
Another stream. Uh, this is going to be an interesting one. I think we're moving on from. We should wrap up on the last stream, the last review that we were doing.
We
It took
should,
a
I think,
couple of.
maybe wrap up in summary rather than finish the video because
Exactly. I think that's a case because the argument was, and we're going to come back to these two doctors, Dr. William Lane Craig and Dr. Graham Opie, and discuss their viewpoints um, in more videos as well, because they represent some of the most um, some of the reasons why people are moving away or are not on the true path, because their way of thinking and where they lead themselves astray in their thought process is an interesting case study for people to understand, to realize, and to ponder over.
it is, and in particular because they are highly respected and for good reason because they're highly respectable. They are clear and honest in their positions. Right. I mean, you can't even compare, Matt Dillahunt or Aaron Ra to the likes of, Dr. Graham Oppie, because, the former are just all over the place and really disingenuous in much of their interactions, whereas Oppie tries to be clear as possible and he understands many different positions, is able to articulate them well, and uses philosophical and mathematical language accurately for the most part. So it's a really good, the way I think of it is it gives, both of them give good clarity on the ways the Shayateen manage to mislead people. And the more clear and honest people can be about their positions, the better we can elucidate these misguidances. But I do respect that they believe what they say they believe, and they put it clearly, and they have done their homework. So they're good case studies.
Yeah, and unlike some of the other doctors that we know of who claim to be doing science on these big topics, right? At least these people are honest, and they do not uh, misrepresent themselves that this is a philosophical argument. This is a philosophical position that they're holding. They see things clearly as what these are.
Well, I think this is the thing, is that everybody's position is actually philosophical if you understand what that term means. It's just some of them are not very advanced and some of them have really gone deeply into it. It's like there was a TikTok live I jumped on last night, sort of on a whim. There was a bunch of atheists in the panel and so on, and they started sort of trying to climb on me like a bunch of vultures. But then one of them was had said, I can't remember, it was something like prove your God exists or whatever, and I asked him about the epistemology and said, and asked, do you believe electrons exist? He said, I don't believe, I know. And I was like, well okay, what's because we have loads of, and then notice that they always do the we, not I have loads of evidence, we have loads of evidence.
Yeah.
As if he can appeal to the collective, as if he's the one who's also done all that thinking and research and experiments and so on. And that's a very interesting sort of sleight of hand that they often do, because I mean this guy completely conflated the map of the territory. He had no idea that he has a philosophical position and that it is a complete runt of a philosophical position. And what they did was as soon as I started sort of teasing apart well, hang on a minute, what's been proved? And I was, mentioning clearly the electron is part of a standard model. It's a model, and trying to tease apart model from reality. They were just like, oh, he's a Phil bro. He's trying to do a Jordan Peterson, and ended up just kicking me off because they couldn't do it. That's the level some people are at.
Yeah. Well, this is pretty telling because it's one of the most fundamental challenges that you face when we have this conversation, right? Because what is your epistemology? And I guess most people don't realize the epistemology they're using.
Mm,
And for most people, it is very difficult to explain. Most, I would say, is like pretty much an understatement here. It's almost all people. It
mm, mm.
takes a while to unpack your epistemology, right? Um,
Especially the ones who appeal to science, and particularly the ones who appeal to physics as a foundation of sort of reality that the objects of science are built up from. Because these are really the ones where, on the one hand, they're saying they know and appealing to that as a foundation. On the other hand, just like these guys I was talking about, a unit of charge, they could accept that as a definition of electron. They had no idea what it means to be a bundle of energy that satisfies SU2 symmetries and all this kind of stuff. And they really, so when I was sort of challenging them on that, they were like, we don't have to understand it to whatever level of detail to know it exists. And it's like, it brings very clearly, the hypocrisy and the standards that they apply to anything that smells theistic to them versus the standards they apply to things that do not. And yeah, it's very interesting how really, if you're going to appeal to physics and physical reality as your foundation, and as understood through physics, modern or classical, then you really do need to understand to at least degree level. Like you need to know what equations are and how they work and how do they relate to experiments, because otherwise you can't actually evaluate any of the evidence, any of
mhm,
it. And this is the key thing. It's like, well, hang on a minute. You're expecting to be able to evaluate the evidence for the existence of Allah and the Quran and stuff like this, but you can't do it for the other things. And this is it. They've kind of trained themselves to think that they can evaluate and understand the evidence of a theory without really understanding the theory. That's how they approach science.
mhm, yeah,
So then they think they can do the same thing to Islam, but the only difference is they were indoctrinated in school since childhood on a particular view of physics, not on Islam.
exactly. And one of the things which is very telling in how language is used to communicate these matters, like when people would come to you and say that they know that atoms exist, they
Mm.
know that electrons exist, they know uh, uh, there's photons and all of these. What basically nobody has actually seen. How do you know that they do exist, right? How do you come to the conclusion that these things must exist, and what is the certainty which you're putting behind those statements? Where's that
Yeah.
certainty coming
Well,
from?
and this is it. In reality, with almost all of them, it is pure appeal to authority.
Hmm.
That is literally just they've been told who takes
Because the
authority.
textbooks are saying that, because everybody around them is saying that. What if none of that is true?
But also because the models work. Now this is crucial.
Yeah.
You can use those models, that base of understanding, to do engineering and to come up with cool technologies and things that are useful. It's like, great, well, the model of one God works incredibly well. And the
Hmm.
model that is presented in Islam works incredibly well and gives you insight into yourself and others and humanity and existence.
Yeah.
That is like an intellectual or a neural technology. Same way as you talk about coding platforms or whatever else as being different technology stacks that are used to deliver tools, so internet
Hmm.
capabilities, capabilities over the internet. yeah, it's you can also look at Islam as providing a tooling stack, and it's got incredible utility as well. So whichever angle they go, you know, there's deep double standards involved for sure.
Okay. Um, so just to start, let's wrap up on our previous video because a lot happened between um, Dr. Oppie and Dr. Craig, right? Do you want to take 5-10 minutes to just talk about it? Because the argument, what they were discussing, right, that the aesthetics of mathematics is a proof that is one of the proofs that God must exist, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, aesthetics was a key part of the argument, but the
Hmm.
argument hinges on essentially, if I were to summarize and hopefully not too grossly misrepresent, William Ray Craig's saying, Dr. Craig is saying, well, on naturalism, um, mathematics is unreasonably effective at describing the physical world and giving insights to it. And in Wigner's own words, it's a miracle that we don't deserve, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, very clearly this warrants and appeals for demands an explanation. And the explanation is essentially trivially obvious for a theist and very, very difficult for an atheist or a naturalist
Mm.
atheist.
Yeah.
That's essentially the sort of background structure. Now, as the discussion progressed, I think Oppie did a very good job of pointing out it's not so trivially simple
Hmm.
because he brought up, for example, the orbits of planets, and on the one hand, Newtonian mechanics and Newtonian view of gravity allowed the sort of not prediction, really, it was mischaracterization prediction, but allowed the if this model works, then there's something we haven't seen that is at play. Point your telescope there, and you'll see it, and you get to see Neptune. But also the point that that very same model is wrong about Mercury. So he's saying, well, if Craig's trivially simple, essentially, answer is that God makes the rules, and then gives us the capability to understand the rules,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
this makes things work. But then Oppie's challenging this, saying, well, these rules, they're essentially wrong.
Hmm.
And actually they're always essentially wrong somewhere. If you treat them as universal, as how the universe is, as how it actually operates, then they are all wrong because they are only applied to a particular domain of validity. Although, as I highlighted before, they don't use that phrase, which is very, very telling because physicists unanimously use and recognize that. um, and if you recognize that they each apply to the domain of validity, then all we have is models, and the models work up to the ability, um, up to as far as we're able to use maths, in which case it becomes tautological that they are effective insofar as they're effective. And so it's not unreasonable at all. It's perfectly reasonable. So it
Hmm.
really comes down to how you see the relationship between the model and the reality, or the map and the territory. And so I think it's very, very interesting because they they were a kind of impasse at some point. There is a very interesting point that maybe we should have got to, where um, Oppie, if I remember correctly, sort of lays out his position that he asserts things as a brute contingency,
Yeah.
or as it just is. And Craig just sort of laughs and goes, I wish atheists would understand that that is actually the point you ultimately have to get to. You're
Yeah.
explaining this by just saying it is.
It is, and there's a couple of things that I would say. Number one is that it's our understanding of these laws that are limited, not the laws themselves. The laws definitely work. The way these laws are being understood by human beings, right? That evolves over time. That is limited. That is imperfect. The laws themselves are perfect for what they're doing. right?
Well, so yes, there is a view to which that's true, but we've got to be very careful because of the ways different people see laws and what laws are. In fact, I
Mhm.
think laws is a terrible misnomer.
Yes, I agree.
Um, it's a really big problem because what we really have is patterns,
Yes.
and we have, and that includes this notion of symmetries and structures. They're essentially mental structures. And so, you put together this system of mental structures, and you have then something that's a mathematical description of certain kinds of behavior, and then the things that are in scope are the things that behave as the model shows, and then other things that don't meet that are considered out of scope. So somehow underlying the whole universe, the naturalist believes that there is some underlying actual law, and we may or may not ever actually reach that. We may, our approximate understandings or our limitations may improve and at some point get the full understanding. Some people say whatever the laws are, the limitations of the human mind and computing machines may prevent us from ever actually pinpointing those laws. So we may always be stuck in approximate realms. But yeah, so that's sort of the naturalist side. But the way we see it in Islam, I think sort of satisfies an in-between position or a superior position, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actively managing the whole universe, the whole creation. And he is al-haq, he is the truth, he is al-qawi, he's he's always consistent in what he does and how he does things. He's always, got full foresight, so he would never have to sort of randomly change his design. He'd never have to go, oh, whoops, I shouldn't have done that, and change things. And so we would expect to see an incredible amount of regularity and so on. But there will also be some exceptions. Like there's an exception to every rule. Really, I think is because whatever rule we can understand and process is not going to encompass everything of Allah's knowledge and wisdom,
Mhm.
and therefore we're always limited. So in a sense, we're sort of we don't think that the universe is fundamentally run by a system of independent laws that are somehow baked into the material. Like the way it actually runs is by Allah's will. And
Mhm.
that's as far and the right place to go and to stop.
Yeah. And that's one of the other piece where it sort of gets conflated in language in these particular discussions, that these laws are almost given agency when these people start talking about these laws as if they have an agency. You
Mm.
need a lawgiver to have the agency, not the law itself with the agency.
Well, yeah, but people flip flop. You see,
Yes.
they sort of, when making argument from one side, then the law is somehow agentic because
Hmm.
it's what causes such and such, and then sometimes the law is just it's just a description, and what's actually got the intrinsic behavior is the matter, and then the matter
Hmm.
becomes the agent. But
Yeah.
they can't resolve this consistently, because if you say that the matter is what has all the behavior and agency in it, which is one way people resolve this necessary being question, then they essentially are stuck either just saying, yeah, everything is just brute fact. Nothing can be explained because everything follows from the beginning,
Yeah.
and the beginning is just brute fact. And this goes back to what I said before about um, layers of. Actually, I don't know if I said it on this stream or another one, which is about the question why, and what is a legitimate answer to the question why. If you look at porque, pourquoi,
Hmm.
wieso, warum, you look at all these different languages, basically for what. The answer to why is really the question for what, meaning for what purpose, which is different from explain X in terms of some more detailed model Y. And science, particularly physics around the Enlightenment period, really sort of flipped this question, where in fact really since Newton, the question of answering why was flipped into give me another description at another layer of abstraction. One example of this is someone asks, kid asks, why is the sky blue? Well, if someone answers, well, because light comes in from the sun and there's Rayleigh-Jeans scattering, and that means the wavelengths other than blue, will miss your eyes, and so on. It's actually just a more detailed explanation. It's not an explanation. It's a more detailed model of the sky and of being blue and of light and the setup. It's a more detailed explanation. It doesn't answer pourquoi. It doesn't answer, why, in a sense of what's the purpose.
Yeah.
And so the end result of that means that all it's doing is describing what is, and that is, if you look at Hume's, is ought conundrum, it's a really important dividing line. You can't get an ought from an is, right? So you can't actually answer why from only what is from the description. So when people think that they're answering a why question with a description, they are necessarily importing some hidden underneath assumptions about what is implied by that description in terms of reasons and answering an explanation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have this person here. Do you want to quickly respond to this individual?
Oh, well, thank you very much, Analytical Apex. You've got a good name. Maybe you can come up and have a chat.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the ultimate question is, do you have your salvation? And then let's see what the evidence is for your salvation, like we were just discussing. So we're happy to have a discussion like that. But if it does appear that you're a Christian, so we will have our Christian streams, and you're happy to jump on them, and we can discuss.
Yeah, it could be interesting to discuss with God Logic. Although the thing is, I've only ever seen him really, take on Muslims or other kind of anti-Christian positions. I've never really seen him have a good sort of grounded in relation to science and naturalism discussion with atheists or indeed Muslims. So I'm not sure he's the right kind of background for me to interact with. So put it this way, if I'm going to go into the laws of physics and how they work and things like that, I think there'll be a lot of stuff we'll agree on, and I think that could be interesting to show that actually there are a lot of points of agreement between us. But in terms of sort of digging into anything that sort of resolves religious differences, I'm not sure.
We won't get anywhere.
But there we go. Who knows? If you're out there and you want to talk God Logic, the only thing I'd say is I tend to far prefer private discussions first, because then I can see how things go, see if I feel it's a good and productive kind of a conversation to have. So if he wants to reach out and have a chat and see if there's good scope or mileage and an interesting discussion, then we'll see. Inshallah.
All right, one final thing, which in the previous video's discussion, as you were explaining this, the brute fact that we're talking about here, I just want to link that idea that atheists do believe in brute facts, right? For theists, the brute fact is the existence of the necessary being, and for us, the necessary being is God. The atheists are basically pointing out that the contingent existences, all in as a set, let's say, are the necessary existence, right? And
some of them, it gets complicated.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them even play different games and say that they treat contingency as different things. The actual notion of contingency
But
sometimes.
let me put my question forward, because
Yeah, go on.
I want you to focus on that part, right? That both of these are brute facts. But the question I have is, do each one of them have the explanatory power, which is the underlying criteria for us to accept anything? Because we accept the we accepted Newtonian mechanics up to a certain point in time because that was the best explanation, right? Then came Einstein. We have a better explanation, so we switched. So the question is, should there be even a debate here between these two arguments? Which one of them is a better explanation? Are they equal, or is there a better one?
Sorry, when you say which two, you mean Newtonian versus
No,
general
no, no.
relativity?
Brute facts, not the Newtonian versus general.
Okay, okay.
I was just pointing that out as an analogy.
So it depends what you assert as the brute fact, right, and what's implied by it.
Hmm.
And I think, this is one of the things I like about Oppie is he has gone deep enough to identify the minimum set of things he has to assert as brute facts or brute contingencies, and
Hmm.
he'll prefer a brute fact to a brute contingency, because a brute fact is something that needs no further explanation, and a brute contingency is something that it believes is true but doesn't have any further explanation. So there's it could have been another way, and he can't explain why it's this way, but that's not a problem. It's just philosophically weaker than a brute fact, which is asserted that it could only be that way. So there's a
Hmm.
subtle distinction there. And what's its explanatory power, and how do we differentiate them? I think a good example of this is, okay, let's take what you said about Newton's laws. Well, you've got Newton's 3 laws of motion, but that doesn't actually tell us anything about gravity, right? Gravity was a whole separate thing. This is something that's I always find quite funny. Is you ask someone at Speaker's Corner, you believe in gravity, and they'll be like, yeah, if I drop this, it's gonna hit the floor, and it's like, that's not gravity. Aristotle had an explanation for that, and your observations don't distinguish Aristotle from Newton. Gravity is specifically the idea that this is connected to and is the same underlying thing that makes the planet's orbit, right? That's a very different statement. So even the I believe in gravity, and Newton didn't propose any mechanism whatsoever. Newton said, literally, they are just it just is so. And people then worried a lot about, well, hang on a minute, this is this action at a distance. Our idea of causality has always been essentially what we call local causality, where something causes something else, and there was no proposed mechanism of causal connection that the gravity was speaking of. It was literally just a model. And going back to what I said, is that really an explanation? It's just a good model. So it's an accurate descriptive method, and it's so accurate that we can sort of see, or it's such a good descriptive system that we can start to see where we have inconsistencies between the observations that we think this model applies to and what the model says we should see in our observations. And that's the trick. That's how it works. So to go back to the effectiveness thing, I would say that we assert what we believe to be a brute fact, which is the Shahada, right?
Hmm.
So what's the explanatory power of the Shahada? Well, here's what's interesting. If you are Graham Oppie, then you have to assert the whatever your necessary being is. He does believe that the in necessary being and that infinite contingencies is a mess, and I agree with him on that. So he'll assert that as one brute fact. But he also has to assert the laws of logic that he's using, for example. There's a lot of other kind of assertions he makes, but he says it doesn't matter. Whatever assertions, other assertions he needs to make, so does the other guy. But if we assert Shahada, so we take everything else out, and we just assert the Shahada, well, that is a testimony that, there is one God, or specifically, there is no God but the God. and that Muhammad is a messenger of God, or really the final messenger, but actually, strictly speaking, is a Rasul of Allah. And that then implies the Quran. Right? So now the Quran is from them is not an extra asserted fact or anything. It's something that's logically implied from the Shahada. So that's in scope. And then you go through the Quran, and it now invokes a fully functioning, fully fledged epistemologic system, axiologic system, morals and stuff, ontological system, and a whole load. There's this massive toolkit that then gets invoked, which the naturalist has actually made like a number of assumptions that people struggle to count. I don't know of anyone who's done a full count of all the independent axioms that are involved in the naturalistic equivalent. Because when you use, Occam's razor or whatever to compare two theories, they're supposed to be like for like theories, right? And this is the thing: if you have a discussion that's just in the scope of physics, well, the Quran isn't just a physics textbook. There's much more that's in scope. So a like for like theory would have to actually be, the whole. Take all of the sciences, all of the naturalistic sciences, from sociology, anthropology, whatever, together with chemistry and physics, and really they should be what's compared. But nevertheless, when I say like a full epistemology and things, even the laws of logic themselves come from the Quran very directly. It's not a woolly reading in. It's truth stands clear from falsehood. And consistency is this key criteria. So truth stands clear from falsehood gives you this law of the distributed middle. The consistency criteria gives you the law of non-contradiction. And the law of identity is evidently made through Allah identifying himself and distinct from other things and so on. So there's very clear statements to give you those laws, but also that those laws only permit everything to be either true or false, and only Allah, only the God, knows that in its absolute entirety. And it also states that humans, some things are unknown to us. And some things they have a true false value that Allah knows, but for us it's always undetermined or unknown. And so this really requires at least a 3-valued logic, like clean logic, KLEENE. But a clean logic is incompatible with the standard sort of 3 laws of classical logic. Mm-hmm. So actually, Oppie or others are going to need to invoke a whole bunch of different logical systems and a way to interlace them and so on and so forth. And all of this has come out from the Quran. So far, we've asserted one single brute fact. And from it, you have an entire functioning system. Whereas, anybody else is going to have to assert a very difficult to count number of brute facts. And this I think is what needs to be properly understood for these arguments. And I think this is what makes Islam particularly unique, because nobody can copy this, right? No other religion has that in it, because the other religions, take the Bible for example, it does not claim to be written directly by the God. And so there's this distinct barrier that has to be crossed with extra assumptions or assertions. And a naturalist can't just take all the rules and whatever they believe and stick them in one book and say, okay, my axiom is that this book is true. A sort of attempt to cheat. Because it doesn't actually bootstrap your ontology and epistemology, unless they were to claim that they're a prophet or that they are God.
Then they come back to
that's the grounding, but then they're not atheists. They're just so it's interesting. It is uncopyable and it is unique, and it does resolve these things in a particularly special way. And this is again why I sort of dislike and like to point out the issues in generalized theist arguments. It's taking on a generalized idea of Allah, where you say, the all-powerful, merciful creator thing, that thing. It's like it's stripping out most of the important details. And if you take physics, any theory of physics, and strip out most of the important details, you're going to easily be able to show that it doesn't work. because you've taken
Exactly.
out the
And
important details.
basically, you're arguing against something which nobody actually believes in,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it is deceitful enough in the sense that it says enough about any atheistic position that every atheist would think that this is an argument against their position. But when you start digging into it, it turns out to be basically nothing.
Mm.
So, that being said, I think this was a good wrap for what we have been doing. And we have something new in store. By the way, the link is there as we go through the next um, session that we would have, where we would go over some of the arguments for atheism and discuss why those arguments do not make sense to us and what the atheists are not seeing in when they make these arguments, right?
Mhm.
So, do you want to just talk a bit about who these people are that we're going to be going over?
Yeah, so Alex O'Connor, I've spoken about a number of times. I think he's really cool. Love to chat to him, one day. Uh, he is very knowledgeable of Christianity, which is an asset in some senses, but also a bit of a handicap when it comes to Islam, because everything would go through that lens. And so he'll sort of misunderstand the fundamental differences in the way we understand the relationship between the God and his creation. And a lot of the sort of questions or quandaries he has doesn't apply so well to Islam, again because of this thing where he spent a lot of time dealing with the generic theist or generic deity arguments and positions, whereas we are only arguing very specifically for Islam, for the Islamic perspective. We're not arguing for general theistic perspectives.
Hmm.
um, so, but yeah, he's very clear and articulate and honest in what he believes and all this sort of stuff. So
Hmm.
it's always interesting to listen to him. And the guy he's presenting with is called Joe Schmidt. He's the one. I think I've said his surname right. He's the one who sort of leads this. His is the Majesty of Reason channel on YouTube. I mean, he's a serious academic guy. He's doing a PhD or finished his PhD at one of the Ivy League unis. I think it's Princeton.
It's Princeton, yeah.
Princeton. Yeah, and he's written an argument, an article for, or co-authored an article for the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and things like that. So although he's quite young, he's very well researched. But he gets very excited. He's very excitable. You see the
Yeah.
two different energies. I think the thing with Joe is it's difficult to sort of. I don't recall him ever really fully committing to a position. I think he loves just the taking different positions and seeing different viewpoints and running around that. I'm not actually sure what he really commits to.
Yeah.
But his atheism is certainly one of that he is not especially convinced of any particular concept of God, rather than the active rejection of God in general, although he obviously rejects the specific concepts of God that's been presented to him. And neither of them, and this is very common, seem to really understand the Islamic perspective. And in fact, I have
Yeah.
never once ever, not ever seen an atheist or someone who professes atheism or a naturalist who understands the Islamic perspective as well as the average Muslim. They might understand, they might be able to quote some Quran and some Hadith and so on, but it
Or
depends.
bring up the
That.
more common tropes that are being discussed, but not really the essence of the argument. Nobody
Yeah,
comes and discusses
like I would love
the.
to see someone. Well, I don't know if I love or if it would scare the hell out of me or it would make me feel, bleh. But it would be very interesting, should we say, to see someone come and correctly describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, describe his names and attributes, describe how we see him in relation to creation, that he's, you know, separate from it and full control over it, and so on. Describe, you know, the underlying ontology we have, angels, jinn, humans, the purpose of creation, why we're here, why we have this small sort of delta t of time where we're in this, you know, rather imperfect world. You know, and it's perfect for its purpose. that you know, but that doesn't mean it feels perfect for us. Certainly, it's not like Jannah, right? Why is this? All this kind of stuff. Like someone who understands the whole framework and then has some argument for rejecting it, like a well-reasoned position. I just, for me, it's almost like asking for someone to come forth with a four-sided triangle.
Yeah. All right. Let's start with this. The first argument that they're going to go over is the problem of evil, and the discussion is about, I would say, about 15 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And
right. Spoiler alert: this is definitely their favorite argument.
This is definitely their favorite argument. All right, let's start.
You could probably link that in the description as well. But our first
10 hours rather than 12.
Do you want to add something before we go ahead?
Let's get cracking. We've talked enough.
Yeah.
12. We're gonna keep things short today.
Mom, just one more video before bed. Yes, we're going to the problem of evil.
So I'm playing at normal speed. I know both of them can speak pretty fast, so it's better keeping it that way.
Yeah, but let's not run through the whole thing, because otherwise we'll take 10 sessions to go through this video. So we'll capture the key arguments and the bits where they rate it.
All right.
Is the first argument, the first one that we're considering. And I'll just go right into it. So there are two kind of broad, the problem of evil. So
for those of us who haven't heard of it, it sort of rings a bell. So maybe you can just refresh my memory as to what it is.
Right. So it's basically, if God exists and God is all good, all knowing, and all powerful, why is there so much evil in the world? It's kind of like spurred by that question. And there are really two broad families of arguments from evil. There is no single problem of evil. The first kind of family of arguments from evil is what philosophers call logical arguments from evil. And these try to show that God's existence is inconsistent with certain facts about evil and suffering. So it's like there couldn't possibly be a God given certain facts about evil and suffering. The second broad family of arguments from evil is what philosophers call evidential arguments from evil. And these basically just try to show that certain facts about evil or suffering are really good evidence against God's existence. They give us good reason to think that God exists. It's not so much that evil is inconsistent with God's existence, but they do give us good reason to think that God doesn't exist. So it's those two broad families of arguments, and maybe we could just start with logical arguments from evil.
Should we quickly pause this?
So logical argument from evil.
Yep.
So, there's a setup. Again, straight out of the gate, it's against an all good, all powerful God, right? So you're selecting out some attributes and really ignoring other ones. It's the generic theist approach we were talking about before. Because, if they were to include all the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no such thing as an internal critique of. So what he's saying is that there's a logical inconsistency, but there's no such thing if you analyze the whole thing from the Islamic perspective, because Allah is the most just, right? As an example, so there's whatever suffering there is not a matter of evil. There's a conflation there between suffering and evil, and then when they're saying, well, good God could have made things better than they are, or had less suffering than there is, and so on. It's like, well, this is under their assumption where they've really actually forgotten all about heaven, which is quite an important aspect.
They want heaven to be on earth. That's
they're judging God as if this is the best he can do for us, and this a whole, it just completely misunderstands the point of this existence. And in heaven everything will get better and better indefinitely, which I think is a point they come to later. I just wanted to point that one out. And the other thing is that in both cases he's saying facts about evil, right? Now hang on a minute, how are you establishing what a fact about evil is? You know, what is your objective basis for whether or not something's evil? Well, they don't really have that. And so really it's facts. It's not even facts, it's perspectives. There are some facts about things that happen, like animals, eating each other, for example. And then there are a whole bunch of beliefs they have in relation to that, which are not factual beliefs. So that's really, really important to point out. Is already this sort of very tenuous use of the word facts. So go on, let's carry on and see what Alex has to say.
Trying to actually exclude the possibility of God's existence given the nature of evil, and this will have something to do with a sort of logical incompatibility between the existence of evil and God. Why would the existence of God logically preclude the existence of evil? I think this would involve God necessarily being good, right? You'd need a picture of God that means that you can't have a God that isn't a good God, and you'd need to have an idea that there can't be a good God who would allow evil, right? Those are probably the 2 points of contention here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it goes back at least to Epicurus and then sort of revived by J.L. Mackie. And there are various different kind of more sophisticated logical arguments from evil nowadays, defended by philosophers like J.L. Schellenberg and James Sturba. But yeah, the basic idea from like Epicurus is that, well, if God exists, then he's going to be all-knowing, all-powerful, and perfectly good. And he's going to be essentially all of these. Since he's all-knowing, he's going to know about all the evil in the world. And he's going to know how bad it is and how to prevent it. Since he's all-powerful, he's able to prevent it. And since he's perfectly good, he's going to want to prevent it. And
Yes,
if a
sir.
being knows about something, knows how to prevent it, is able to prevent it, and wants to prevent it, then it just follows that the being will prevent it. So then, if God exists, there's going to be no evil. It just follows from God's existence.
Let's pause it
But
here.
since there is evil, it just strictly follows that God doesn't exist. So God's
So this is fascinating for me, because the idea that it just obviously follows or strictly follows, again, is actually, and forgive me, Joe, it's very naive. Although Joe knows that it doesn't strictly follow, it's more detailed, but the way he put it, because if you think from the Islamic perspective, all he's saying is God should have stopped at the angels. That's it. Like, there was already the case where everything followed in perfect order and harmony, and there was no bad, everything was good. That was already the case. Allah already made that, but he's not limited to that. And when he went to make humans and the angels were worried about all the corruption they'll spread on earth and stuff like that, he says he knows what they do not, right? That there's a good reason for this stuff going on. Had humans not sinned, then he would have wiped us out and replaced it with something else. And if you think about it, more is possible if we can sin and ask for forgiveness than is possible if there are only beings that never sin in the first place.
Yeah.
And this is like something that would appear an impossible conundrum to the angels, but Allah can solve it, and this is his way of solving it. They do later come on to, well, okay, there can be some transformative reason for humans, but that doesn't explain animal suffering. But animal suffering, there's two interesting things that one is the assumption that apparent suffering is suffering, and the reason I say that is we believe that a shaheed, someone who dies as a martyr, Allah can remove their soul from their body, so that they don't actually experience that painful moment of death, right? Now these animals are going around submitted to Allah, maybe except the ones possessed by jinn, and so we can see this body suffering, but is there any soul experiencing it? And so it's really a false equivalence to try and equate it to our experience of suffering. So this is one really important point, and the other is, well, what would be the point in them at all if we couldn't? So humans are supposed to be, we're supposed to be some khalifas. We're being trained to be khalifas of some portion in some way. And so in what sense could any of it make sense if there were not things that certainly appear to suffer, and we believe that they suffer, and are led to try and do better by them, and led to try and improve the situation for them and be mindful of them and be respectful of them. But this is another sort of long discussion I had on another channel, and I actually mentioned I said in that discussion, I said, their apparent suffering is why we shouldn't just treat them like rocks, and people are tested and differentiated, based on that. And then the brother came in and said, well, actually, hang on, even rocks, we shouldn't mistreat rocks. We shouldn't just go around, kicking rocks. And subhanAllah, he's absolutely right.
So one thing I would mention here, which is something I've been observing, and we will find that throughout this discussion as well, is how they take the agency away from the creator, right? That there could be a reason that they might not be understanding, and you don't take agency away from a human being. Just because something is rational or something seems rational to do doesn't take away the response that a particular individual would give, or the actions a particular individual would do based on their circumstances. It's completely different. Your epistemology, your knowledge, your what you know is different from what they know, and we accept that for human beings, but we're taking that part of agency away from God, and basically making God almost mechanistic, that he has to act in this way. And if that is the way God is supposed to act, and that is not the results, then God does not exist.
Yeah,
This
it's an
is a
ironically
gross
constraining
misrepresentation.
view
Yeah.
of God, and this is a recurring theme, where they say, well, if God is such and such and such, then he will only act in such and such certain way that makes sense to them, and it is ironic because it is extremely constraining, and
Yeah,
then. But
and this
later
is
when
the
it comes
deception
to
here.
the attribute paradoxes, they laugh at them. I think it's ridiculous, it's stupid. But actually they subtly invoking attribute paradoxes here, I think, without realizing it, or at least in the Islamic perspective, they're attribute paradoxes.
Yeah. Let's continue, because the challenge with the problem of evil is that there are many different ways in which this argument can be presented, and they're obviously they're not going to discuss each and every one of them, but it's definitely something. If you have the capacity to understand this, this is not for everyone.
I
If
think
you
we
have
could
the
do a whole stream on it and call it the problem of hasty judgment.
Yes, exactly. All right, let's see what else they say.
Existence is incompatible with the existence of evil.
QED sounds great. Now, like we'll discuss some of the objections, and hopefully we can keep things relatively brief because I want to get through as many of these as possible. Also, this is rather familiar territory for most people listening to this show. I want to say from the outset, though, this immediately strikes me as S tier, not necessarily because it's like the best argument in the world, but just because it's the problem of evil, man. This is like the atheist argument. It's like the first thing that people go to. It's the last thing that people sort of complain to about God. Probably if they made it to the pearly gates themselves and were still criticizing him, it would be either that.
Okay, this is actually a very important point, because for most atheists, right, when you get down to having a discussion with them, the arguments come down to this problem of evil. More or less, it's about that. It's either their personal experience, somebody did something to them, right? It's very rarely an actual academic, um, logical argument. It's sort
Yeah,
of emotions packed in. It's sort of a booby trap, right? And you have to unpack it, because
yeah,
it's
and unpack
so
it very carefully. Cut the green wire,
subjectively
then the red wire,
personal
then
to
the
them.
blue wire.
Yes, exactly, because it's just so subjective. It's so personal to them, what they've experienced, that they're rejecting God. It's most of the time, it's sort of a response like, oh, This happened to me. Hence, and God did not come in and protect me like a mother hen would protect its chick, or the mother would protect its young, right? Hence, God doesn't exist.
Well, see, that's often underlying, but few people will really express it so clearly. At least in my experience, what I see is people who underlying their rejection or wishing not to believe, let's put it that way, of the God, are deeply emotional aspects, whether it be personal experiences, whether it be psychological wounds from that have attached, let's say, through the schooling and the way they sort of sought refuge in the system. And so it becomes their sort of protection. There's a whole load of sort of reasons, but I think there is a strong emotional underpinning that most atheists are not able to recognize and speak to, and what they do then is use the rationalization arguments or the logical arguments as a kind of defensive shield that defends them from having to see how their beliefs are connected to their emotions. Everyone's beliefs are connected to their emotions one way or another. We're not robots. That's just a reality. The human brain, has a frontal cortex, but it also has, a whole load of other.
The rest of the brain is there.
Yeah, the rest of the brain still exists, and there's this sort of bizarre idealization from the Enlightenment of this perfectly rational man and so on. But so all of that being said, there are exceptions like Oppie, which is interesting because there's no obvious emotive element to his arguments and his position of arguing. He does things on a largely rational foundation. So it's not to say that it's always the case that they at least that the emotions and the reason are inextricably entangled. Some people have been able to disentangle them and represent the reason distinct from the emotions underneath, but most people they put things in a form of reason, but really it's a shallow cover over some emotional distaste or some emotional reaction. And I think Alex O'Connor here points that out really in one way or another. He's an emotivist. So yeah. Hey, sorry, I don't want to go on for too long because we'll do this thing where we only get through 10 minutes in a 2-hour stream.
This is, I think they do talk about get into this a bit more.
Or maybe the sort of not enough evidence would come in at a very, very close first or second. So I mean, what we didn't talk about was how we're going to actually rate this. So like relevance took him so far to be like absolutely top tier, but I don't know. I don't.
Yes, did it for the theistic arguments. Was at least, generally speaking, how strong are they as arguments? Like ratings
allow evil. There are lots of reasons why God might allow evil. God might need to allow evil because because some people will say that, like, I mean, the initial response to the logical problem of evil is to essentially say that, well, God can have good reasons to allow evil. There are lots of reasons why God might allow evil. God might need to allow evil because human free will is a valuable thing, and therefore, in order to have free will, people need to be able to freely choose to murder each other. C.S. Lewis talks about how if God were to still the triggers of every gun in World War I, preventing war from happening, it would seem to disallow the freedom of the soldiers to fire guns at each other. And as evil as that is, if you take that away, you sort of rid the world of something even worse than evil, which would be the mechanistic kind of no free will animals that they would become. So that's one famous reason. Another might be that evil is necessary to attain higher order goods. You can't have bravery if you don't have fear, so you need the bad thing to get the good thing. So lots of sort of reasons why God might allow some amount of evil, but also, as well as saying, okay, evil itself isn't logically incompatible with God, there are also people who say this is a big complicated topic, and I'm not convinced that it's logically incompatible with the existence of God, but I think it at least provides some kind of reason to sort of count against God's existence. So there's sort of a less strong version of the argument that just says that, and this is where we're in the evidential territory, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean,
Before he continues, do you want to add something?
I mean, not too much. I think there's one thing that's worth noting is when he says God needs to. Very
Exactly.
careful with your language.
Yes.
Go on, what did you want to say on that?
Oh, again, it comes down to this agency, right? And I keep bringing it up because the God that they are talking about is mechanistic. Our God is not mechanistic, right? Our God is a conscious existence that does things with purpose. Everything it does is with purpose, right? And that's what Allah keeps repeating. Do you think we just created this out of just for jest, or or there was no purpose behind it, right? This life and the world, the existence around us, it asks us those questions in the Quran, right? So I do feel that if you're a Muslim and you're seeing this, right, pick up on these little cues that are extremely important for you to realize that they're not representing the God that you believe in. They're not representing Allah in this argument. They're actually created a straw man and they're attacking a straw man.
Well, I mean, to be fair to them, they're not saying that they're specifically attacking Allah and Islam in this view, but is exactly what I was saying before. Is that I mean, is it a straw man? Now, that's actually let's go back a sec. It's certainly a straw man with respect to Allah, but remember, a lot of people when they say I believe in God do just believe in some woolly generic concept and don't really have it very pinned down at all. And that is very weak, and it does fall over to some of these kind of arguments. So it is worth bearing in mind. They're not attacking something that's entirely non-existent. They're just not attacking anything that's relevant to Islam. And also the very existence of these generic concepts themselves, they were originally produced by the Enlightenment philosophers in the first place.
Yeah.
So these philosophers in the early Enlightenment produced all these woolly abstract concepts of God, and then the sort of popular philosophy, if you like, meant people, laity took on watered down versions of the philosophers' new concepts of God, and then that became widely distributed amongst the population, and then the same the same line of philosophers, if you like, their progeny, then went knocking down these things that were created by other Western philosophers. So the whole thing is really in a Western bubble. Now you could change what he said and still maintain what he's trying to say, I think, by saying, God willed to, rather than needs to. And you're saying, so he willed to have these agents. He willed to make humans that have free will, and in order for humans to have free will to exist, he would also have to will or permit such and such and such, and that's a way of making it work without saying God needs to. And of course, there could be many ways of resolving this that we can't see and understand. Allahu alam. It's very important. The intellectual humility that we have, we're enjoined upon us, that we must have as Muslims, is very important, as opposed to the faux intellectual humility of a lot of people who follow the sort of I believe in science approach to understanding things. And the other thing is the way he talks about free will. I think this is really important. So I simplify, but very clear and well accepted definition. I think that will is the intention to act plus the capacity to act, right? Because you can't say that will is just intention, and you can't say that acting without any intention is will. So really, it's those two things that come together. So in Islam, we believe we have freedom of intention, but it's not quite right to say we have freedom of will. Right? If I intend to move this pen, it's only by permission of Allah that it will actually move.
Hmm.
Right? He's in full control of everything. If he wasn't holding us together, we would fall apart, as it says in the Quran, right? Literally. And so there's almost like there's an illusion of free will in a sense that there's a kind of standing order we've been given. There's a standing order that he will permit us. Should we intend to move our fingers, he will permit us in general. But sometimes he prevents it. Sometimes, through whatever means, there's a number of means for it. Sometimes he prevents it. And there's also matters that are clearly barred from us, right? We can't just say, I'm sick of gravity. I will to not be bound by gravity. And so there's clearly, at best, it's constrained rather than free will. But the way, Alex and others think of free will, I think is really the problem. I think if they were to understand freedom of intention, but the actual action itself is all under Allah's control, there'd be no problem here. Because when he's saying freely choose to murder, so well, hang on a minute, Allah is looking and measuring your intentions and what you intend to do, and it's not for he already knows, but it's for manifest evidence, right? It's for the purpose of generating the evidence for everyone and everything else, for various kind of reasons. And so, but remember, everything except the God dies, right? The God is the only ever living one, and he's unique in that. And so if everything must die, why is it evil that things die? They have to die.
Exactly.
And the question is, when or under what circumstances, and so on and so forth. Arguably an early end can be a blessing, especially if we agree that this life is not nearly as good as the next one. And the thing is, only Allah, again in Islam, only Allah can take away one's life. Strictly and only Allah, does this. You could never end someone's life slightly early, however much you tried. And so, again, this thing he said about silencing the guns and World War One, it wouldn't change their allotted time. Everyone has their strict appointment. So he's arguing against, or his argument, sort of assumes a certain understanding of free will and a certain underlying sort of ecosystem of thought, which makes a lot of sense in Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment European intellectual spheres, but just makes no sense really in Islam. What's this comment that's popped up? Just told you the many religions and belonging to gods. Wait, I might be a misplaced apostrophe.
This is sort of a chain of comments from Jake Green. And Jake Green, you're welcome to join the stream and have this discussion on the channel, right? That the idea that God has been created by man and not man being created by God, right? That this is a way of God is a human construct. Okay, the religions are human constructs, right? We'll be happy to unpack this with you on stage. Just click the link.
Certainly looks like a definitive claim. Be interesting to see what evidence there is for the claim. Always hilarious seeing humans in the world thinking they know something more than the cosmos. Well, back at you, bro. Let's it's funny to see what was claimed, and what do we know of the cosmos? So Jake, if you're new,
these like humans don't know anything other than the cosmos exists, and what humans know of the cosmos is very little.
All right, tell you what, Jake. Tell you what. Come up here and tell me if you believe electrons exist, and if you do believe electrons exist, let's see if you can prove that. Let's see what your standards of proof are. So, fair warning, I graduated in theoretical physics. I went in atheist, came out Muslim. Yeah, go for it. Like, I used to echo stuff that sounds a lot like what you're saying. Be very careful. Have the humility that you're saying religious people should have. I strongly suspect just from your comments, maybe I'm wrong, but I strongly suspect you believe a lot of things you can't prove, that a lot of your beliefs are actually underlying appeals to authority, and that actually you believe a lot of things that maybe you don't even understand as well as you think you do, and then questions whether or not you can really believe something you don't understand. But if you are, of a certain intellectual level, and you want to have, proper discussions, I'm not a, mudslinging debate bro type, so not really interested in that. But if you think you can have a serious discussion and substantiate your claims, and you think you have a something of interest that I haven't considered, or that would be interesting for the audience, then feel free to come up. But otherwise, just stay in the comments, I guess.
All right, let's move on. Let's see. Okay, do we skip to the next one, or
let's just
There's
see
a
if we
bit
can
more.
see the point where they rate it. I think it's just coming up.
Yeah.
If you
For
just
broadly the
skip
reasons
to
that
it.
you mentioned, philosophers have mostly turned away from logical arguments from evil
They're rated here?
to ranking.
Yeah,
this one.
we're
I
here.
know you
We're here for the
suggested-
ranking man.
I know you
See, I
suggested
don't know,
S
'cause-
tier.
Yeah, talking about it now, it's. I mean, it's definitely got to be at least A, right? Like, I think it's probably S tier. Like I say, just because it's an absolute classic. I mean, it would be rediscovered by any person who ever thought about the existence of a good God. There is the problem that it assumes God has to be good. It doesn't really do anything. I mean, you said earlier that we're not arguing against any particular religious tradition. There are religious traditions that believe in a sort of deistic, non-personal God that this doesn't really do anything for, which makes me maybe want to bump it down to A. But it's got to be one of those, surely, right? I'm not sure. Maybe it's just too good.
I would vote S tier because, like, again, it's the problem of evil. Like, if that doesn't
Yeah,
get
you're
S
right,
tier,
man.
then what else is going to get S tier? And
yeah.
lots of professional philosophers defend this, and it does really have, I think, sway with people, and it's got some high degree of plausibility.
Cool. Right. Problem of evil is going in the S tier. I'm writing this down just so I can keep track of where we are. And we'll put it on screen. But for those listening, hopefully you can just keep track. So problem of evil is.
Any words on this being the S tier argument?
Well, so we didn't sort of watch the whole thing about their evaluation criteria, and they did discuss that when they rated the theist arguments, they were mostly rating them based on their how compelling they were in an analytic philosophical sense. So how strong they are as an argument. Whereas they also sort of feel that there's an element of how appealing they are to people, because a weaker argument might be more effective to a bunch of people because it's easier to understand and easier to process, for example. It could be some arguments just have a really big cultural significance, and that sort of should bump them up and so on. So they never really settled on particular criteria. I mean, the whole thing is kind of a joke in that Alex refers to this tier ranking thing as being a year-old meme. They're too late to the meme party, but yeah, it's not really so much about the ranking, but it is interesting. They both sort of say S tier straight away, like they're both. It's right up there, and because for me, it's like many arguments actually is logically pretty good against most concepts of God, and it is also emotively very powerful. So it's a good sort of exploit and control mechanism, to use cybersecurity language, for many brains that it gets in contact with. And again, I think if they were, imagine if instead of their background understanding of theology, of monotheist theology being based on Christianity, if their background understanding had been based on Islam, I think they would struggle to rate this above C tier. Yeah. Because it just doesn't hold. It deserves an F tier. Yeah, I mean, quite. There is another argument later where they struggle between F tier and C tier. Because if you have the Islamic framework as a background, the whole thing is just nonsense from start to finish. I mean, the better you understand Islam, the more ridiculous this becomes as a basis of argument. It just, the good thing about it, if anything, is it invites lots of different opportunities to explain the Islamic perspective. if they're a sufficiently willing interlocutor. But yeah, so it's funny, but actually, this sort of rating thing does give me a good guide or idea. I'm stating why should I click on a link about people talking about their figment if a god. That's not really what's going on, Jake. We're discussing two prominent philosophical atheists who are rating various different arguments against theism, and we're discussing how it relates to our particular belief system.
Let me just call it what it is. This is just cowardice. You're not even able to articulate why you believe in what you believe in. So you're afraid to come on, and that's fine.
Yeah, you
Just,
spoke about the cosmos, Jake. I mean, let's do it. I tell you what, let's not speak about God at all. How about that? How about this? If you believe you got these beliefs, right? Let's talk about the cosmos. Let's talk about the existence of electrons. Let's see how strong your evidence is. Let's see why you believe what you believe. Let's see if you can hold for your own beliefs the standards that you hold against theists. Let's see if you can justify anything you believe about physics, be it the cosmos, the universe, be it the standard model of particle physics, be it in quantum field theory, thermodynamics, classical mechanics. Go on.
Yeah.
Come
Remember,
up.
this is how you started, right?
Yeah.
This is a very strong claim that humans in the world thinking they know something more than the cosmos.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh.
So yeah, don't run
Let's do
away
it,
now.
Jake. Let's see if you have any strength behind your beliefs at all. Let's see if you let's see if you're just someone who believes what's been fed to you, if you just everything is an argument from authority or an argument from incredulity, or let's see if you've got something substantial. Feel free, pop up, have a chat. It doesn't have to be me trying to convince you to believe in Allah. I don't think that's something that is in anyone's hands except Allah anyway. But if you haven't yet been exposed to somebody who can talk to you about sciences and about physics and help you to understand how it really works, differentiate the map from the territory, and get you to understand, how evidence and proof relate to things you believe, what evidence even is, mathematical and logical reasoning and relationship between things that are actually observed, and facts versus beliefs. A lot of people misunderstand this, and it looks like you're one of them. But if you want to come up and have a discussion respectfully, feel free, go for it.
Yeah. All right. The second argument, let's go to it.
Is S tier, probably not a huge surprise to anybody, and probably not super interesting to anyone who's watched even like 2 minutes of any video I've ever made in the history of my.
One thing I want to bring up, because there's something we should actually do. We should be a bit more nuanced than just the S tier versus all of this. I do think this is, when it comes to popularity, or when it comes to, for most of the atheists, the reason why they would disagree with the existence of God, it comes down to this argument, right? It comes down to the problem of evil. Either it's a very personal matter where they perceive something that happened to them as evil and God not being there to protect them, right? And the perceived evil and their perception of God not protecting them is their reason for, or what they believe to be the reason for what that God shouldn't exist, right? According to them. I don't think this is a very strong argument when it comes down to the logic behind it, or the um, or that it responds to any of the more nuanced understandings of God that most of the major religions have, right? It fails at um, not just with Islam, but with some other religions as well, right?
Yeah, but a lot of this is where it's backed up by arguments from incredulity. I think
Yes.
in some of the bits we skipped over, Alex covers, for example.
Do we
Um,
go to it? Do you think that will be useful? We can.
no, I think we should just, on the bar it sort of shows the lumps where
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
videos.
Do you
We should
want
just
me
sort of
to?
cover those lumps. Otherwise, we'll just spend forever.
Yeah,
Uh,
let's actually go through it because this
Mm.
is the most watched part in most of the video. Let's actually go through this. Okay, this is where we were.
He could have made photosynthesizing animals that get their energy from the sun instead
Sorry, forgot to bring
this
up.
one's really funny. I have to
of
laugh. at
having
this.
to devour each other.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, let it play.
All right.
Have created biological diversity in humans. He could have created it in 6,000 years, as young Earth creationists think he actually did. But no, he chose hundreds of millions of years of animals ripping each other to shreds. He could have made photosynthesizing animals that get their energy from the sun, instead of having to devour each other savagely in order to survive. But instead, no, he chose animals devouring each other savagely. He could have made animals chemosynthesized, so get their energy from chemicals. He could have made animals or biological organisms or whatever out of material that doesn't constantly get lost to the environment, so there is no need to kind of continually imbibe new materials.
Okay, we've got to stop.
He could have
Gotta
given
stop.
like anesthetic in the claws and teeth of
stop it.
predators, so that
This
Okay.
is very. It's very theatrical. That's why I think it got more views.
I know.
Oh,
One of
the
the things
part
I
is
love.
coming up though.
Hang
Yeah,
on. So one of the reasons I have to laugh at this is, he talks about, chemosynthesizing as in, feeding off chemicals. I mean, there are literally bacteria. That's exactly how they live. They're
Yeah,
living
exactly.
off sulfur vents under the sea. And that's how life forms of a certain size, shape, and type, work for very good reasons. There are all of the things that he said exist. Like, he's got this artificial boundary between plants and animals, but plants do photosynthesize. Some animals take their energy from some energy from the sun as well. So it's remarkable, to me. And when animals eat other animals, newsflash, that is chemical processing. They are feeding themselves from chemicals. And one of the ones he raised was, why don't they just not lose anything to the environment so they can what he actually said is, why aren't they perpetual machines? So
Yeah.
it seems he's essentially questioning the whole foundation. Look, well,
Why
don't you
is
just
life not life?
why don't you
That's
change
pretty
all
much
of physics? Why is life not life, and so on? Yeah, it's just these things sound superficially like good questions, but they're really, really shallow. And it really surprised me when I came across this, because I thought Joe was going to say these things and then follow them up with, but of course, there's more to it than that. But he didn't, and they just sort of like ran with it. And again, from the Islamic perspective, it's even more absurd, because it's just like, why isn't everything made the same, or why isn't everything why doesn't everything just have the same purpose and act in the same way? And this thing about animals savagely devouring each other and so on, again, this is the fact that animals feed off each other and so on. Yes, this is something we observe. The fact that he calls it savage, is to do with this human superiority distinction. And well, on naturalism, how do you have human superiority?
Yeah. But is that even a logical argument? Because this is emotions. This is playing with emotions again.
No, well, this is it again. This is this. They're making fact claims about evil, but evil is to do with this axiologic, realm. They fact claim about something about that such and such happens is not the same as a claim that such and such is evil. But what it does really is, I think one of the reasons this stuff is all so effective is it's really a disguised ad hominem attack against religious people, because what it does is it sets up this thing, and if you say, yes, this is wrong, this is horrible, this shouldn't happen, whatever. You know, or it's just the way things are. But it's not justifiable in any reasonable way, except for you know, naturalist physics, and it's very sad and so on. Then they can say they're good people, and they can say, you know, that they're better than anyone who accepts it for some reason, or doesn't decry it as evil. And so really what they're doing is attacking the personality of whoever takes the theistic perspective. There's, you know, saying, oh, well, you therefore justify or think it's right all this massive amount of suffering. And so in many ways it's a subtly hidden ad hominem attack rather than being a really logical one. Because if it was logical, then they'd be saying, well, part of the definition you know, of this of the God is that he does no wrong to anything. And so where they've come to a conclusion or concluded from their observations that wrong is done to something, then they are missing part of the picture. Then they're not attacking that structure. You know, in Islam, again, all of this is, when you're a naturalist, you entirely forget about the afterlife.
Yeah.
Right. It basically is irrelevant to discussions, and wherever it comes in as a balancing factor or as an important factor in the discussion, it's treated with incredulity and all this kind of stuff. But you know, we believe that you know, even the ram and the sheep will have their differences settled. You know, that there's a specific quote about that. So you know, they're not left out in that sense, and justice isn't established. You know, and the reasons why things happened, the reasons why it was better that things happened this way, the reasons why things happening this way is in fact the most merciful way they could possibly happen. Right? And that's a really important point. If they call it evil and say, why so much suffering? Well, the answer is you need to get a much deeper understanding of what the answer to why is. Remember, we were saying at the beginning, you know, the pourquoi, the for what, you know. Well, if they've thrown out the entire basis that answers this question why, then yeah, they've precluded themselves from understanding. But again, if what they're seeing is not understood to be the most merciful possible way, they're missing something in what's going on.
Yeah. One of the things that needs to be understood is, in Islam, we have this concept that all of this suffering, a person who's gone through so much suffering in this world, right, they will immediately forget about all this suffering once they enter Jannah. Right? That 1 second or that one dip in Jannah would be enough for them to completely forget about all of the suffering. So then the question to be asked is there really any suffering if they never actually feel they suffered, right?
Well, I mean, there is certainly suffering, you know, experienced in this
In
dunya,
this dunya,
but
yeah,
this is exactly it. It's what's your scope of discourse. If you were to add up the
exactly.
entire existence of a human being who makes it into Jannah, then it'd say, not really. It's the size of you know, an infinitesimal delta t
Yeah,
versus
but
the rest
that's
of it.
the
Whereas
analogy.
if it's someone who goes to Jahannam, then yeah, for sure, that the whole thing's
Yeah.
suffering.
The analogy I would like to make here is that if somebody is exercising, they're putting their body to suffering, right? But these people would not consider that as evil,
No,
right?
no.
So on the grander scale, in a life where you're going to live for eternity future, and this life is a blip in that particular time scale, you go through a little bit of suffering, but it allows you to earn the higher levels of Jannah, right? Is
Right,
that
and
really
this
suffering anymore?
well, or is it exercise? Yeah.
Yeah, it's an exercise. That's the point.
Right, and that works. I think even Alex recognizes that works for humans, and I think this is why so much of his exposition of the argument from evil focuses on animals, because for animals there isn't the same kind of, I think, as he puts it, redemption arc. You know, so the animals are not fighting for their own, you know, different levels in Jannah and so on, and striving and struggling for this thing. But you know, in Islam, they have a different purpose. They're constructed in a different way. You know, they without going into too much detail, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of very good explanations for why they go through these things. But like I said, there's a lot that we also don't know. Seeing the body writhe in pain does not imply that there is a soul experiencing that pain, you know. And so the analogy would be, if you look at a surgeon operating on someone, they're under anesthetic, you know, but their body's being cut open. Like, imagine someone walks in on that and just has no idea what anesthetic is. They can think, oh my God, this guy's being absolutely savaged, you know. But actually they're not feeling the pain. There's no soul feeling that pain at that time. You could have a dead frog and you can put a bunch of electric currents through it and its limbs are going crazy, and then you could do whatever to it, and still there's nothing experiencing that pain. And there is this massive assumption that there is actually a soul experiencing the pain at the time it's experiencing the pain. It's a whole different world. Like there is something very different about the insan, about the human beings, and about the animals, and there's a reason for that. But the naturalists assume that they're essentially the same thing, just different levels of advancement or different types, you know. And so for them, any kind of justifying distinction is some ad hoc you know, excuse, if you like, and they already have a strong disdain or distaste for it. It's already very prejudiced against. Plus there's the incredulity. It's like for them that there's this whole, you're asking them to eat a whole shovel full of gravel in order to accept that, because they're coming from such a different perspective. And this again, I think, is why with Dawa, you know, in general, it's much better to explain the underlying perspective that we have on reality, on who God is, what creation is, the purpose, and so on, and get that established first before going into all these things in which you differ, because that way around you have a good way of trying to discuss things clearly and communicate clearly. But if you just jump into the problem of evil or any of these other discussions, there's just so many it's such a different, you know, basis of understanding reality, that there's very, very wide gaps that have to be crossed with very, very skinny bridges. It's very, very difficult. You know, I've been on both sides. I've been very heavily on both sides. You know, I still, there's a website, you know, I was going through that has 240 arguments for atheism or against theism. And none of them are really substantively new. Maybe a few slightly different, you know, tweaks or quirks or stuff. You know, I've been through them all, and I used to run most of them in one form or another. You know, so I get it. I get why it looks crazy. I really do. But yeah, I don't believe that now.
Okay, we do have somebody in the back chat asking the question. He's a Muslim brother, and
okay.
Do you want me to bring this up? I can actually put his arguments.
Yeah. Is it a written question, or he wants to pop up and have a chat?
He cannot turn his camera on, so I'm just gonna say that let's address what he's writing down in the back chat. Let me actually bring it up on the screen. Give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm. Is he still typing?
Oh, no. I'm just putting it up so that people can read it.
All right, cool.
So
I know when I'm listening to something, if there's a long period of silence,
no. Yeah, I know.
Worry, I've dropped my
Start
connection.
questioning your sanity, right? Okay, this should come up now. Okay, that's the argument. All right. So all extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Premise. That was the premise one. Premise two is the claim of God's existence.
Oh, dude, can you put new lines in?
A separate line, yeah.
That's better. Okay.
Okay, premise 3. Extraordinary evidence for God's existence must be evidence that is evidence 1 found within the physical realm, but challenges the laws of physics. Okay, and or evidence 2 beyond our capability because it breaks the boundaries that limit humans, time, space, physical, cognitive limits. Conclusion, therefore, the claim of God's existence requires evidence that is either a challenge to the laws of physics or beyond human physical cognitive capabilities and boundaries. Revelation.
Okay, so it's an interesting bunch of stuff to discuss going through this. I mean, I have to say, I'm not. I don't see it as being a very compelling syllogism.
Yeah,
Even if I were to grant the premises, I wouldn't say that it necessarily that the conclusion follows. But I have quite a problem with the premises. I mean, premise 1: extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. You know, classic Carl Sagan quote. But really, you might as well just say I'm biased, because why? If you're presupposing that some claims are ordinary and some are extraordinary, depends on what your basic view of reality is. You know, if someone claims that you know an angel protected them, that is an incredibly, extraordinarily ridiculous claim under naturalism. It's just mundane under Islam. You know,
Mhm.
so first of all, this thing of extraordinary claims is you're already prejudicing claims. So why don't you say claims should have appropriate evidence, you know, or something of that nature, something that's neutral, that doesn't inject
Yeah.
some
Epistemology
prejudice.
in there.
Well, I mean, this is related to epistemology in that, you know, on what basis are claims related to evidence in a legitimate way? You know, that's really what premise 1 should do, is either establish an epistemology or well, really it should establish an epistemology that's widely held. People who say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence are just parroting a soundbite, and they've never really thought about their epistemology in any intelligent way whatsoever. And I say that, you know, knowing full well, you know, Carl Sagan's did lots of astrophysics and cosmology and stuff like that, but I don't think he thought about his epistemology in a clever way at all. He didn't do any fundamental breakthroughs. He was philosophically incredibly naive. You know, he was just a good orator. You know, so yeah, presuppose secular epistemology. I mean, particular epistemology. Yeah. In fact, it doesn't clearly demonstrate you know, what epistemology is being referred to. It just says there is one. There is some relationship between claims and evidence, and it sticks this word extraordinary in there, which allows people to sort of tilt the scales however they like. Now, later on in the argument, it sort of shows what he means by extraordinary, which is using the laws of physics as a basis for what's ordinary and extraordinary. So that's where it's tilted to the naturalist, you know, in a sense. But there's a problem here, because as soon as something is demonstrable, it comes under the laws of physics, according to physics. You know, you talk about the Big Bang, right? All those problems with it, the most widely held model is the inflationary model. And as you wind back the clock in time towards this, I mean, not that the singularity necessarily exists, but close as we can get to the singularity, you know, gradually the laws of physics and the nature of reality as we understand it just keep breaking down and breaking down. And we lack a reliable theory that can talk about quantum field theory and general relativity in the same breath well enough to be able to, you know, deal with what's going on. Like literally the nature of time and space as we know it breaks down. So on the one hand, like that is already supernatural. Like the not saying the before the time or whatever, but under a definition of natural, which is like the normal laws of physics that we know and understand, like the the moment of the Big Bang, or the moment after, you know, time is however many femtoseconds, or whatever fraction of a femtosecond after zero, is already, even the time that all the physicists, or most of the physicists, agree under the inflationary model, already breaks all the physical laws. It's already exceptional, miraculous in that kind of sense. It's already a special unit of time. And so what physics then does is try to find some way to encompass or include that. Like, if you were to imagine, like, we naturalists will call, you know, angels, to be something that's supernatural and beyond physics and all that kind of stuff. We believe they're made of nur, of light, although that's not exactly the same concept of light as in physics, but there's obviously some overlap. Imagine there was a bunch of beings that came down and presented themselves to people, you know, made of light and all you know, fancy looking and so on. A lot of physicists, a lot of naturalists or whatever would turn around and just say, look, this is a weird kind of alien. And nothing to, you know, they say God because they've studied humans and they're trying to manipulate us. You know, they're in no way a proof of God. Like, anything that happens, if it can be verified, then, because remember, physics is just a system of description. So if they can describe it, they can fold it into their description system. And that's not the same thing as folding into the laws.
Yeah.
So the thing about extraordinary and normal being defined by behavior in the physical realm is very problematic, because actually the physical realm, as we know and understand it, is packed full of remarkable miracles that are
Exactly
called miracles under the system of naturalism, where they say anything we can study and affirm is no longer a miracle.
Yeah, and the other thing, we were just talking about it, right? This idea of brute fact and all of this. This is it. You're basically asking for a miracle, right? That is a miracle. Just that the definition of miracle in Islam is, once you've established the one brute fact, the definition tones down everything else. That basically, when we're talking about naturalist or any other view, they're not just asking for a miracle, they're asking for pretty much magic, something coming out of nothing, really.
But
There's
the thing is, were it to happen, then they would start questioning God another way, right? Because it either, you know, if it appears to one other person, they say, oh, well, it didn't appear to me. But if it appeared to everyone, it would no longer be supernatural. It would be normal, whether we understand it or not. So it's a completely false sort of framework that's set up, where, you know, they pretend they've made some space for some evidence, but they haven't, because were any evidence to be presented, it's heads I win, tails you lose. And that's the setup, that's the framework. And it's only by taking this, like, very prejudiced view that the naturalist works. Now, obviously, this doesn't come from a naturalist. This is a Muslim who's you know, put this together.
He's actually backstage now. I'm actually going to bring him up because he's got follow-up questions. So let's just discuss it. I know ex-Muslim came up, but he's left again. So I don't know if he's back, then we'll pivot to him. But for now, let's just bring him up. All right. What do we call you here? Do you want us to refer to you as Ani? Assalamu alaikum, akhi. You're upstairs on the stage. Yeah. Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum salam.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, so the argument is just like, it's almost like it's paved the way to the extraordinary evidence within Islam, to the Quran.
So I understand, I think, where you're getting from, but a lot of my problems that I'm trying to go through is to do with the hidden assumptions and the structure that sort of goes into it. And I appreciate what you're trying to do is that, you know, pick up the way a lot of naturalists think about things and sort of turn on his head. You know, they say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. You know, okay, let's show you the amazing, extraordinary claims to get
and that's true to some degree.
Yeah, and you're right, in the sense that the evidence of the Quran is extraordinary. The Quran itself the very existence
That
of that
that
book.
is one of the reasons that it claims it is from God.
No, that's actually a conclusion. I mean, we cannot
It is
just
a conclusion, but it's also one of
yeah.
the reasons why the Quran claims that the fact
No,
that the book is
yeah,
extraordinary.
it's a conclusion if we introduce it as extraordinary. If we point out at what is because in existence there is what explains all else, i.e., God, and all else. Okay,
Mm.
so within all else, there is extraordinary evidence.
Mhm.
Well, this
By the
is the
way,
thing. It's extraordinary. The problem with extraordinary is it's a relative. It invites this subjective element, and this is why I was saying there's prejudice involved in it. So I think one way to strengthen this is to get rid of the notion of extraordinary and talk about claims requiring evidence. Because what then happens is when you get to the the seerah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or you get to the contents of the Quran. Then there is on naturalism, it becomes inexplicable. So on naturalism, you can take one aspect of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life or his knowledge or his wisdom, and you could take a few pieces of the Quran, and you could try to argue that on naturalism there is an explanation for that being there, or for that being the case. He had knowledge of Arabia used to be green, just an example someone asked me about recently. But if you add up the whole Quran and all of the stuff that's in there, the whole seerah, the more you add in, the more ridiculous and absurd the naturalist attempts to explain it under their framework become. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
right.
Where I'm coming from is just like let's assume that I'm agnostic. Okay.
A'udhu billah.
Yeah, just as assumption. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not, by the way.
Yeah.
So let's assume I'm agnostic. I'm just looking for what's objectively true. Okay.
So, Akhi, can I ask you this? Are you Muslim? Are you questioning anything? Is
No,
it
no, I'm not.
so? Okay,
I know God exists. I have
all right.
no
So,
problem
so brother,
whatsoever.
we do have ex-Muslim here,
Oh,
and
okay, okay.
what I'll do is we'll pivot to him as we just discussed. If we have the opportunity, we'll bring you back up and
Okay, no
discuss
problem.
this more. All right,
Yeah.
all right,
Thank you.
brother.
Inshallah. Jazakallah
Assalamu
khair.
alaikum warahmatullah.
Salam.
All right, ex-Muslim.
You're up,
Do you wanna?
but you're on mute.
Yeah, I think he's trying to fix his camera.
Well, you can unmute in the meantime, I guess.
Yeah, so we don't see you. It's black, so that's fine.
Yeah.
No, he's just gonna come back. Okay, let's see. Let's wait for him to rejoin. So, brother, you're back.
As an Abani. Yeah. So he's I do get what you're going for here. Saying,
Oh,
okay,
he's back. Sorry, thought it would take
hey,
a
okay,
while.
one
All
more
right,
try.
ex-Muslim, can you speak?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah,
Yes,
now we hear
we
you.
can hear you now.
Sorry about that.
All right.
My camera's off.
Yes,
That's
camera's
fine.
off. That's fine. You verified yourself earlier, so I'm.
Yeah, I
able
showed you
to-
my face, so you know I wasn't a troll.
Yes, we had a conversation before. You came
Yeah,
up.
last week.
Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I think.
A week or 2 weeks. I communicated with on the email. I got a chance to read the poem as well with Hakeem. I saw your email. I replied to your email, by the way.
Oh yeah, a very brief reply though. I thought there would be more to it, but now I know who
Well, there
you are.
was.
Yeah.
Well, I thought I sent two emails. I think it was one email or.
No, I think if you have a look, you may have one in draft because you sent a sort of very short, sort of one line, a very very pleasant reply. But I'm surprised to see you back on here given the stuff we're discussing. But yeah, a lot of it was very personal, the stuff in the email. We weren't sort of making rational arguments or rational discussions. It was more
I wanted to apologize because I don't know why I call myself ex-Muslim, because when you think of ex-Muslim online on YouTube, because a lot of the people that are calling themselves ex-Muslims, basically they're insulting Islam and they're insulting the Prophet Muhammad. That's when you hear the term ex-Muslim, and I shouldn't have called myself that, because when nowadays, like, actual ex-Muslims are people that are not. They've been just out of their faith for all their life, where they're not practicing their religion. Because I've known people, that left Islam, but they never really insulted the faith. They just stopped believing it altogether, where they just, we're not praying no more. Now we don't have anything to do with the faith. So we're just drinking alcohol and we're eating pork and we're smoking. So we just left the religion. So that's what sort of like as who I am. So I should have just changed my name. So it should
So
have made it
I
more.
just helped you with that. We just
Yeah,
put you in as
I've
questioning.
seen. I've seen a lot of ex-Muslim thing on YouTube where all they're doing is just insulting. I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with anybody insulting anybody's religion, whether it's
No,
Christianity, Judaism, any religion. So
you were pretty cordial, and that was the reason why we had that conversation with you. We have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to blasphemy, right? If
I'm
you're
aware. Yeah.
here just to bash on Muslims or any of our figures we hold true, or Allah Himself, right? You're not welcome here. But no,
but we know that's not the case with you. And we know you're.
Well, that's not the case
it's
for
just
a lot of people. Yeah.
well,
Sorry, go ahead.
unfortunately, it's true that it's not a case for a lot of people, but it's a lot of those people aren't then coming online having discussions. What I think seems to be going on is that a lot of people seem to feel the need for validation of their rejection, and so they sort of need to get a regular top up, going onto some stream somewhere or whatever, or going onto a comment section and having a bunch of nasty arguments, generating a bunch of nasty responses and being like, yeah, there we go, that's why I left. I don't know. And then that's not what characterizes you. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people who have, as we would say, gone astray one way or another, but yet are not disrespectful and not just generating random attacks. However, those people I do also see tend to not present Islam in a very cogent or effective kind of way, and so this is where I often think that people leave it. What they leave is really often a cultural version of it, or not a very good understanding of it in the first place.
A complete misunderstanding is what they leave.
So, going back to our last discussion, you mentioned about physics and this theory. I try to understand it that way. I would try to explain it. I try to elaborate that when even today you were talking about it. I sort of can pick up the concepts. Like for me, I guess somebody who understands mathematics and physics. I've taken calculus, I mean, in college, but I don't.
It's a good basis.
I don't really want to, use that, to understand faith. So last time my argument with you was religion itself is a base. It's like a game of luck. It's like where you play that lottery ticket, and there's billions or millions people playing it, and so it's what you do in this life, and you get the results in the hereafter when you die, and then you'll find out if you're going to hell or heaven. And you see what I'm saying? So, and it says that many people didn't know where they were going to end up, and even the Prophet Muhammad did not know where he was going to go, where people are going to go if they're going to heaven or hell. Like you don't know where you're going in heaven or hell. I don't, you know what I mean? So it's no matter how good you do in this life. And there's something that I read where you could be praying, you could be the most praying 5 times a day, you can be doing all these things, and you can still end up being in hell for something you've done. So it is like a kind of luck. That's when I mentioned it. It's like a game, and it's luck. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? And
No,
I feel
I
the
do
same way with all the
understand.
faith.
And I think this was the discussion we're having and this is where we disagreed, and I was trying to get across to you, for me, the fundamental difference between a lottery, where it's a game of luck, and a game of skill, right? Where you wouldn't call archery a game of luck, right? Even though there's some random element or some randomness to exactly where the arrows land. Clearly skills, very important in that. We spoke about poker, where you can your ability to win a game of poker is strongly influenced by your skill level, even though there's obviously a lot of randomness in the hand that you're dealt with. And so, for me, a game of pure luck is a mischaracterization, because remember, at least under Islam, you're judged by your intentions, and ultimately a no amount of iman is going to be wasted, but also no arrogance can be permitted into Jannah. And so that's what this whole process is, right? If you still have some belief that God exists, then one way or another, you're going to be rescued from that fire. But not before all of your arrogance is removed. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you mean so arrogance, like your mindset, the way you think, you're doing good things, but your intentions could be bad. You're I think I mentioned that to you in an email about the thought process, like it's how
Yeah.
it's so it's all right, I'm gonna help you out today. Here, I'm gonna give a homeless guy $5 to get something to eat. And in my mind, I could be saying, "Man, why did I give this guy money? He's,
Yeah,
I could have
exactly.
something bad about him. I hate this guy or something, evil."
Well, some people
But
they give like $20 to a homeless person, and it's completely in secret. Sometimes the homeless person's even asleep, and they just sort of tuck it into where they're sleeping and walk on.
so
Versus
you're doing
someone
a
who
good
gives
thing,
well
but you could
versus
have bad
someone
thinking.
well
Yeah.
versus someone who is giving $20 on a live stream on camera to all their followers to show off how generous they are. Like, there's obviously a big difference on what's going on there, right?
Yeah. So if I was to send a super chat to your stream, like, but out of, I mean, not to show off, but I guess that's a bad thing. I don't know. It's just really confusing trying to
Right.
understand.
I know, I get you. I think for me, that one of the things to really clarify is when you're talking about going to heaven or going to hell, like, bear in mind, if you go to heaven, that's it, you're staying there. There's no getting kicked out of there, afterwards. But if you go to hell, it may be that you're pulled out of there, and the only things that are left in hell indefinitely are the ones who are defiantly disobedient. I remember, like, to be a kuffar, someone who covers and the truth. It's someone who knows, understands, believes that Allah exists and Muhammad is his messenger, but deny it and fight it anyway. So we do have, you've got to differentiate. We do have very clear, unambiguous, non-random criteria for who goes to heaven and hell, and whether it's temporary or permanent. But again, this arrogance thing, we couldn't cope with most of us, I should say, couldn't cope with knowing for sure we go to Jannah. We'd be so arrogant about that. So you've got to sort of take that into account. It comes from humility. So it's not that we're saying throwing our arms up in the air and say, "Oh, well, screw it. We may as well still and not worry about it, and who cares because it's just a lottery," because that's not the case under Islam. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay, I'm understanding what you're saying. So I have a few questions that I need to ask. So based on intentions, so I read a few things as I've said, and this is that when I mentioned last week on your stream that Muslims will still go to hell, you know, why is that? Why do you still have to go to hell? And then they come out of They come out of hell and they enter paradise. So what happens to the non-Muslims? Why are they in hell, and why are the Muslims coming out of hell? Why are the Christians and the other
I
people?
see.
Why are they
So,
still in
so
hell?
this comes back to this iman, like not one drop of iman will be wasted, right? Iman is this belief in Allah, and we absolutely don't say that only Muslims are going to heaven. That's completely like the opposite in the sense that we know full well there are other communities that will be in Jannah. Like, that's explicit. It's just that since Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is now the effective way. He is the best way to go there. That's not to say that nobody will go to heaven other than those who hear, understand, and follow his message in his way, because there are other people who never understood or never sort of received the message, and they will have a different test. There'll be some people who, I've met plenty of people who are Christian or say they're Christian, but actually their beliefs are much closer to beliefs of Tawheed, because they actually reject the Trinity, and they're actually very surprised to hear that a lot of the church, insists that Jesus is called God. They think of him as a messenger. So we can't a priori say that these people will have such and such definite destination. What we say is that your best shot and the only reliable way, the path of reason, the path of with evidence and so on, is to go via Islam. And if you understand Islam but reject it and try and choose another path anyway, that is a sign of the kind of behaviors and characteristics that isn't going to make it into Jannah. Does that make sense?
I understand, but because you have to accept the truth. I want to give an example. Well, this is not example. This is actually true. So I'm not a Christian. I just want to clarify that. I have a lady who lives next door. She's a neighbor. Now, she doesn't go to church. She doesn't read the Bible. She says she believes in Christ, right? So she tried to get me to, accept Christ. I said, I don't believe in anything. By the way, I'm not here to preach any gospel. Again, I'm not a Christian. She said that, I've known her for many years. She said she's been through a lot. She's been through, she's a single lady, no kids, no husband, nothing. Her sister passed away. She tells me, she's forgiven everybody. She said she's been through a lot. She's been abused as a kid, physically, mentally. She's been abused by her father, her parent. She was abused as a child. And she said she has forgiven a lot of people. And she said that she's repented for everything. And I asked her, do you go to the church? Do you read the Bible? She said she doesn't do any of that. She said she believes in Christ. She said because she said forgiveness is the key, right? She forgives. And I said, okay, that's a really nice thing to do. Now, there are also people that are not Christian, that are not Muslim. There are also good people out there too. They're forgiving, they're merciful. They don't preach, religion, and they're good-hearted people. Speaking to them, they have possibly good intentions. They don't want to hurt anybody. They respect everybody. They don't insult anybody's religion, by the way. They don't insult anyone, any religious figure. They're good people. What happens to them? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what happens? Is it they end up in hell? Like, how,
Well, I
you
hear.
see what
I
I'm
mean,
asking?
the first thing I would say is we've got to be really careful, because the correct answer is Allahu Alam, meaning only Allah knows, or Allah knows
Okay.
best.
Can I
Because
take this in a different direction? Because there's an analogy I want to put forward for the brother to address.
can
And
I
then,
can you
yeah,
hold the analogy and let me respond and then pop the
perfect.
analogy in? Okay. Because what I wanted to say was, first thing is only Allah knows. So we can't we've got to get away from this idea that we can determine where such and such a person is going. Like we only have the guidance we've been given and about what will happen, and that guidance includes to have the humility to say we don't know. We have certain criteria and so on, and we certainly have the recommendation of the best way for a human to try and avoid touching the fire, and we also have some cast iron guarantees about eventually getting into heaven. But we could also deceive ourselves in some way. Now, these sort of good people or good-hearted people, I mean, sometimes I've met people who appear to be very good people, and then a certain thing happens, or they're in a certain situation, and suddenly it's like the mask is off, and actually it's really disgusting underneath, and I've been absolutely shocked. Because sometimes you don't really know. I mean, there's a lot of stories of wonderful preachers and whatever who do lots of good things and charity and whatever, and then find that under the hood they've been abusing children, whatever. I would always be careful to sort of say that we know such and such is a good-hearted person again. And I believe that a lot of these people who are genuinely good-hearted in some way, that Allah will not waste that. But some of them, maybe that's, some of them, those could be characteristics that Allah's given them out of mercy for the people around them, right? Because maybe they would be terribly destructive forces if it weren't for the mercy Allah gave them. And this is a perspective thing, right? If someone is like, whatever characteristics of me are positive characteristics, they're only due to Allah's mercy and the gift that He's given me in the first place. For me, is a claim that it's about me, that I've somehow made me good, is itself then arrogant and starts to lead me towards the fire. So I always have to be thankful for God. So if there's anybody who appears to be a good person, but is not thankful for God, I do smell a rat. There's something going on there. And sometimes there's nothing bad going on. And were they to be presented with Islam and understand it properly, they would accept it. Or perhaps Allah has planned for them that they live their life without it, and they have a different test on the Day of Judgment. It's really, we've got to get away from this idea that we can know and make these judgments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I understand. Now I know the
And
children.
before you continue, I do want to
Yes.
put forward this analogy for you, right? Let's say that you're in a position like a manager in a company, right? You have to hire someone. You hire an individual, and this person comes in, and they've been given a task. Let's say they have to perform task A every day. All right. Now every day they come in, you see this person as being very popular with everyone because he's helping everybody out. He's doing everything that anybody asks him to do, right? But at the end of the day, when you look at whether task A got done, it was not completed. Okay, right? One day, second day, you take a look at this, the same happens. Task A is not being completed, right? Third, fourth, a whole month goes by. Task A is not being performed. But this person is very helpful to every individual around him. Everybody loves him, everybody praises him, right? Are you going to continue employing this individual?
Probably not.
No. What is your reason? What is your rationale for not employing this individual?
He's not getting the job. He's not doing the job right.
He's not doing the job that he's been tasked to do, right? That's the thing. So here's my question to you. When God has told you this is how you're supposed to, this is what you're supposed to do, what's the point of everything else if you're not doing that job? You can be the best person to every other existence out there, but if you're not doing the main task you're here for, what is the point of your existence?
Right. So you have to serve the purpose. You have to,
Yeah.
fulfill your duties and your job.
And this is especially important if you bear in mind that, at least from our perspective, all the good qualities, it's too arrogant to say we didn't create them. They were somehow given to us by God through the life he took us through the way he handled our hearts, whether he hardened or softened them, and all this kind of stuff. Like, we don't take credit for what's good, but we take accountability for what's bad, and then ask for forgiveness and ask to be improved. Like, that for us is mentally and emotionally a healthy way to deal with the situation we're in. So when you're sort of talking about someone who's good to other people but not doing the core central role of the job, even that goodness to other people is itself actually a mercy and a gift from Allah in the first place. So to give them credit doesn't make that much sense, especially if they're not then also giving credit back to Allah, to God, and saying, thank you for this, and so on. Do you see?
Yeah. So I understand. So going back earlier, I wanted to say that. So when I asked about the Muslims being in hell, that's because they could have done all the good things, and it was their intentions. They had probably had arrogance, or they probably had something. Um, you know, so a person. So it's not just about doing good. So you cannot have any kind of evil in your heart. So if you have arrogance or pride, or having a lot of ego and a lot of evil in your heart, but you're doing good things, you can still, God, of course, God can judge you for that, right? So you would have to
But
clear that up. So
yeah, but remember, no one's perfect, and none of us are going to be as good as Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So remember, or did you learn about this whole, being weighed on the scales? And before we go to be weighed on the scales, there's this whole sort of arbitrage process where people can come and take good deeds from us if we've wronged them, and then if we have no good deeds left, then they can pile their bad deeds on us. You remember that stuff?
No, I didn't read this. I read this that there will be the online. I read the on Google that there will be Muslims coming with tons of deeds, and they can still land in the hellfire. I read that.
This is one part of it, but this is the mechanism by which that works. So I think there's a lot about the eschatology, and this end times process that I think you'd be fascinated by, and I think it would help to understand a lot of these issues. In particular, how is it that these people with a mountain of good deeds end up with them being turned to dust? They could be, for example, remember Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says your actions are judged by your intentions. So you can have good deeds, but with terrible intentions, and they're worthless, or they're not with the correct intentions.
I got a question that I need to ask you. This is important. So going back to saying so going back to say that the religion, it's a game of luck, right? So if it's not a game of luck, that you're gonna end up in heaven or hell, that so these people that are praying and giving charity and doing a lot of good, the Muslims that end up in hellfire, this hellfire they end up at, but they did a lot of good. So see, you mentioned earlier.
Let me run
Earlier,
through. I think what I
okay,
was about to say is exactly answering this question you're asking.
because you said fulfill the duties earlier. You have to. You're talking about job earlier. Get the job done.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you have to. You're fasting. You're praying. You're doing good deeds. And do you see what I'm saying? Where I'm getting at? Because earlier you're saying you have to get the job done. Like
Yeah.
God gave you a task to do. But I'm
I
saying
get
is
you.
that's where I'm going at with this. And you're still ending up in hell. Okay.
I get you. There's quite a few components for me to address. Let me start then from this getting the job done thing. What is the job, right? Allah says that He did not create us for any purpose other than to worship Him. So the job is to worship Him, but we've got to understand what it means to worship Him, right? So having relations with your wife can be an act of worship. Picking up rubbish from the street can be an act of worship. Saying a good word, giving a smile to someone can be an act of worship, right? It's not just about praying, and it's not just about doing the fard, which are the obligatory acts of worship. Like, it's about your whole life. From a utilitarian ethics perspective, it's like maximizing your utility as a being that worships, right? So the job is to do this. Now, something I often sort of offer to people is, if you were to sacrifice your life for something, like, that is a de facto act of worship, right? In one way or another, like, human sacrifice is a very clear act of worship. And so if you sacrifice your whole life for something, that is worshipping something for some purpose. And if you sacrifice some portion of your life, it's really no different. But as human beings, as any limited living thing, there's a point of birth and a point of death, and a continuously connected path of existence between the two. So always, every segment of your life, you're making choices and sacrifices, doing this for that. You can't be praying if you were drinking. You can't be going out and giving charity if you didn't do the work to get good source of money in the first place, and so on. And so there's always it's not a matter of if you're worshipping, it's a matter of what you're worshipping. A lot of people end up worshipping money, or worshipping the state, or worshipping all sorts of friendship groups, or music bands, all sorts of things. So the question is always, what are you worshipping? And this is whether or not you're doing a job of worshipping Allah, or doing another job worshipping other things, and in what balance. Does that bit make sense? But there's a second part I need to address.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Awesome. Okay, so part 2 is then this thing where some people will have developed this giant pile of good deeds. Remember, actions are judged by intentions. So some people can have a pile of massive good deeds and say, look at all these good things I did, and they'll just become dust, because it's like, yeah, but none of that was like, those actions only happened by Allah's will and permission in the first place. So how are you taking credit for it? You're not going to get any reward for that, or any good weight on your scales, unless it was done with the right intention for the right reasons, because that's the point of this whole selection process and development process. But also remember this thing, and I think this is something you didn't know, and we can talk about a bit more, or you should look up, is this huge arbitrage process where people will say, this person wronged me, give me some of your good deeds, and someone will say, this person wronged me and I need to dump a bunch of my bad deeds on them. So this is this process by which everything sort of gets squared away, so that nobody isn't unjustly weighted against anyone else. As this arbitrage process is one of the reasons we have to say, look, I can't keep a register of my good deeds and check that I've got enough to offset my bad deeds. Like,
So,
this.
I want to pause. I have a question, and you just mentioned in regards to wronging others. So wronging, as in, say, I stole money from you, right? I stole $100. I stole this money. I've never gave it back, and you're upset at me that I never gave you this $100 back. So now we would have to deal with this, or
Yeah, could be.
obviously, so something like that, or killing somebody, or murdering, raping someone.
Yeah,
You have to answer this in the next, if you don't
just
pay the
careful with those
price.
words. We like to use the
I'm sorry, apologies.
the censored versions of them. I forget sometimes too.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sorry, unaliving and
yeah,
abuse or any. My apologies. Okay, so you unalived, or you did something you're not supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
So you didn't, you never got caught. So obviously, this is something you're gonna have to answer to God about that, right?
Mhm.
That's what I meant to say. And despite having all the prayers and the good deeds, but you hurt somebody, you stole money from someone, that's something you have to answer.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that sort of gets balanced out. But maybe you've done so much good deeds and you haven't wronged people that much, so it's still good. Maybe your bad deeds massively outweigh your good deeds. Maybe you you have loads of good deeds, but they're actually worthless. And maybe you have loads of bad deeds, but they won't actually be attributed to you. And because just as much of the pile of good deeds can be turned to dust, same with the bad deeds. But all of this it's not that it makes it completely random like a lottery. It's that it makes us have to have humility and be very careful. Like there's a lot of things that will be recorded as good deeds that we don't even notice. And there'll be a lot of things likewise recorded as bad deeds we don't notice. And there'll be a lot of things that we think are really good deeds, but we actually didn't get our intentions particularly straight, and they're actually not going to be on the scales,
So it's basically better to settle your debt before you die, so you don't have to
Exactly.
pay the price in the next. So you don't
And
even, you don't even get
that's all the
questions
debts.
about it.
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
all the debts. Everything where you can, get. It's very, very important to try and seek the forgiveness of people, and not just like generally, but like specifically, and try and find, because you don't want that to be yet another thing that comes along on Judgment Day and puts in jeopardy your pile of good deeds or adds to your pile of bad deeds, right? So yeah, all of this is indeed very important. But I think that the key thing is that we couldn't, even if we wanted, keep a spreadsheet and know where we're going. That's what it means by have the humility that you don't know. But that doesn't mean it's just like random and makes no difference what you do. You might end up here or there.
Let me ask you a question, because you mentioned something about intentions earlier. Let me ask you something. I hurt you, right, in the past. I've hurt your feelings, or I did something. I've changed. I became a better person. I'm practicing my faith. I'm doing good. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm also apologizing to people that I'm supposed to apologize to because I said some bad things about them. I'm returning the money I stole from my brother or my friends. I've stole their money from them, and I want to clear that. I want to have good intentions. What happens if I leave something out? And do I still end up in hellfire for that, or like how does that work?
Well, I mean, you're not going to be able to cover everything, but you
Even though I
sorry.
had good intentions, I had the good intentions.
Well, okay. Now, here's something interesting: is if you intend a thing, and you genuinely intend it, but you don't manage to get round to actually doing it for reasons beyond your control, you still get rewarded for that thing.
Okay, so, but they would still have. Okay,
So
now,
if you genuinely intend to go to, let's say, 100 people that you've upset back in the school days, but
right.
you manage to find 50 of them, but you just cannot find the other 50, it's very possible, I won't guarantee because Allah only knows, but it's very possible that Allah says, well, you genuinely set your intentions to ask everyone forgiveness and try and make make good on whatever wrongs were there, and so I'm gonna reward you as if that had occurred. But there's also, careful, because there's this aspect where some sins are against Allah, and He forgives those unilaterally if you ask Him for His forgiveness. But some sins are against other people, and it would be unjust for Him to sort of forgive you on their behalf, and so they will have to forgive you. And this is where this arbitrage system in the afterlife comes in, where they'll forgive you in exchanging good deeds and bad deeds.
Okay, I have a final question that I want to ask. I mean, I'll still communicate with you in the email because I have to go soon.
That's cool.
Um,
I think you mentioned a second email, so just check if it actually sent, because I'm pretty sure I only got one, but I'll look and see if I missed one
it
as well.
probably didn't go through. Once I get off here, I'll check it out. So my last question to you is, um, um, so there's some people that have disabilities, right? That obviously they don't get judged. People are deaf, or some people with mental illness, people that are really mentally ill, like to the point where they can't come back to anything. Like, do they get judged, or like how does that work?
I
I'm not
think it,
talking about myself, just generally speaking.
yeah.
Blind, disabled, people
Can
that
I
died.
can I take this one? So
Okay.
remember, brother, this is something you need to understand about Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. He is the most judge, right? He's enjoined Islam and enjoined Muslims to establish justice in this world, do you think he would not have established justice in the akhirah, the hereafter, right? They would be given a judgment which is fitting them, right? They would be asked about what they are capable of, not if they're not capable of something. If someone is unable to comprehend what it means to pray salah, um, they're completely incapable of doing that. I know of people personally, they're not capable of doing that. To expect them to pray salah, to expect them to fast, to expect them to do things which a normal Muslim would be able to do, right, is even us humans believe that that's going to be unfair. Do you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the source of all justice, is actually going to be unfair to them?
If God is, forgiving, as he says, and,
Mhm.
he's merciful,
So
I don't think he'll be unfair. No.
yeah, so this is what you need to ask yourself the question of: who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who we're talking about? Go back to his sifat, go back to his names. He's given us these names for a reason, for us to start understanding him. So if he says that he's this is who he is, right? He's already responded to you in the Quran. Okay, all you need to do is find that. So I think, my brother, what I would recommend to you is go back to the Quran and start understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who he is. Because every time he explains something, right, it that such and such happens, Allah is saying and he is the most wise, or he's the most just, or he's the most this. Understand that ayah in that context on why it is those specific, because normally it's two names falling after any particular um, action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So understand that action in light of those names. And inshallah, these questions that you have, right? Um, all of these misgivings, right, about why Islam may not be true, they will be answered. The Quran is going to answer them. You don't need us to answer them if you start reading the Quran.
Although the
I'll
only
read
thing
more.
I'd say is that some of the things might not be so obvious who are directly answered in the Quran, because they're more directly answered in the Hadith. So it may be that some good sort of scholars or imams who talk on this subject, because a lot of them talk on this subject, it might be easier for you to digest and go about it. But absolutely, this is answered by the Quran, very, very well. And the example of, we know, for example, it won't say in the Quran, but you'll see it in the Hadiths and the scholars that if you don't have, if your legs don't work, you're not expected to do the same salah. If you have a certain illnesses or whatever, you're not expected to fast in Ramadan, and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of pretty obvious, and the rest sort of follows by extension. If someone's just not got the faculty of reason at all, then they're more a test for the people around them than themselves. But Allah will know things in their heart no one else does, and how and why they're being tested and why they exist and so on. Like, it's all covered. I just feel that someone or a bunch of people have done you a real disservice by not really giving you the full picture. And if you had the full picture, I think these troubles you've had would have been dealt with before
I
you
don't
fell.
mean I don't mean to sound judgmental. It's just the Muslim folks that were around me. Again, I don't wish bad on anybody. There's a lot of negative things I can say. I just don't want to.
Yeah, and that's a very good
there's just
characteristic. I wouldn't encourage
they
you
were
to.
not they were not as you say, they were Islamic type of people, but they had their names. They presented themselves as Muslims, but they were not.
Well,
Again, it is what
Allah
it
knows
is.
best. But here's what's a funny irony to me to this is that it could well be that on the day of judgment, you get to go to those guys and be like, look, all of these sins that I picked up for this period of time, I picked up because of such and such you said and how you misled me and so on. And Allah might say, yeah, you're correct. Go on then, put them all on those guys. They're not your sins.
I probably forgive them because I don't, hold hate in my heart. But
Yeah, and if you did, then Allah will grant you something
um,
even better. This
yeah.
this is
And
the thing, you know.
and here's
But
the
if
thing.
you,
This is a question of intention. What would be the reason for you to forgive them?
the thing, well, I'll tell you the reason. The thing is, so for many years, right, I've hold on to so much hate and anger, and sometimes I still do. What I noticed is because when I hold on to so much hate and anger, it backfires on me. So, and say
Mhm.
that, right here, I want to hurt Hakeem, right? He did this to me. He said bad things about me. I'm for years and years. I'm like, I want to hurt Hakeem. I can't wait to see him. When I hurt him, what happens is I'm not gonna do it. But what happens is that rage and anger just ends up hurting myself, and
Yep.
it destroys me mentally. And then I become just more mentally sick in the head or something. And
Yeah.
do you see what I'm trying to say? So I'm
But
Oh,
like,
for
I might
sure.
as well just
It
forgive
ends
and
up
just
taking control of you, ends up
yeah,
exactly
burning
ends up
through you.
but
destroying
that's
you.
so here's the thing. The
So
question
might
is,
as well just forgive, man.
I get that, and I'm not saying that's not a bad reason, but there's actually a better reason, right? And this is where intention comes in. This is how, as Muslims, you start thinking once you do this, right? A better reason to forgive someone is that if you forgive a creation of Allah on some wrong that they've done to you, Allah is actually going to forgive you. He's going to forgive you of something wrong that you have done. So if you want forgiveness from Allah, forgive His creation.
Something wrong I
Forgive
done in generally, or something wrong I done to someone else.
to in generally or to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Something,
Okay,
if
okay.
you want forgiveness from Allah, forgive His creation, forgive
Yeah,
His
other
slaves.
people, to make it
Yeah.
simple. Yeah. So
Yeah.
here's the only difference, right? Is what you're saying is very, very true, right? You know, and it's like holding onto a hot coal, with the intention of throwing it at an enemy, and you never see the enemy, and all you've done is burn your own hand, right? So there are very good reasons in and of themselves for forgiveness, but this is really understanding why it's such a powerful thing, why it's such a strong emphasis in Islam, and why it's so important. Why being the most forgiving and most merciful is such a regularly emphasized characteristic of Allah, and characteristic He enjoins on the Muslims.
Hakeem,
However, if doing it for the intention of getting that good result for yourself is different from doing it for the intention that Allah loves to see it and He asked me to do it, and then still getting that good outcome. It's just whether or not you also gain that
yeah.
intention. Do you see what I mean?
I understand, Hakeem. I'm in a hurry because I'm actually
Oh,
working.
sorry.
So if you're here next week, and if I get a chance to read more and understand better, I'll think about taking my shahada. But you gotta give me some time, man. So I'm in a hurry though.
Yeah,
I'm working right
we're
now,
not going to
so
rush you.
I'll
We're not
talk to
going to
you.
rush you. Go ahead.
Are you guys
All
here
right,
next
we'll wait for
Saturday?
you.
You here next
Yes,
Sunday?
inshallah.
Okay.
Inshallah.
All right, I'll talk to you then. All right, take care. Bye.
All right, you take care, sir.
Take care. All right. Okay, that was, yeah. Let's make dua for him, chat. Okay. Do you want to just address that question the other brother brought up?
Yeah, is the other brother still here, or has he had to drop off?
No, he did drop off. Maybe he's still around and might jump on.
We're up at about 2.5 hours, and I'm gonna need to get going soon. We can finish off a quick summary of it, but I think it might be better to do it with the brother present. If he comes back again. I think he kind of said most of our piece on it. We can maybe if we sort of try and get through more than one argument from
All right, let's get to the second argument. Give me 1 second.
I think if we get to like the fourth one, we get to the first one they actually negatively rate.
Okay. This is the argument from divine hiddenness. Let's go ahead.
Next up is the argument from divine hiddenness. So there are many different arguments from divine hiddenness. It's a bit misleading to say the argument. But here's one way to construe the argument. The first premise would be something like, if a perfectly loving God exists, then there's a God who is always open to a personal relationship with any finite person. So the idea behind this premise is that love seems to be like relational. It seems to be self-giving, and it goes beyond mere benevolence and toward a desire for like union with the beloved and a personal relationship with the beloved and involvement with them for its own sake. And so given that God is perfectly loving, it seems like God would always be open to this kind of relationship with creatures. We might ask, along with J.L. Schellenberg, who is one of the main proponents of this argument, how could God count as loving someone if at that time God is sort of closing off the possibility of a relationship with them, if God is preventing them from being able to participate in any meaningful way in a kind of conscious reciprocal relationship with them? It just doesn't seem to fit very nicely with God being perfectly loving. So that's the first premise. If God's perfectly loving, then there's a God who is always open to a personal relationship with any finite person. The second premise would be that if there's a God who is always open to a personal relationship with any finite person, then there's going to be no non-resistant non-belief in God. Okay, so what is non-resistant non-belief? Well, it's just basically people who fail to believe in God, but that's not, their failure to believe in God is not due to like willful, culpable resistance to God on their part. So that's what a non-resistant non-believer is, and that's what non-resistant non-belief is. It's someone whose non-belief is not due to willful, culpable resistance to God or to relationship with God. And so the reason for thinking this premise is true, that if there's a God who is always open to a personal relationship with any finite person, then there's going to be no non-resistant non-belief. The idea is that the relationship in question, a kind of conscious, meaningful, reciprocal relationship, requires that the other person believes that you exist. Right? You need to have them actually believing that you exist in order to be in a kind of conscious, meaningful, reciprocal relationship with them. And so given that God is open to that, and the other person is also open to that, they're not sort of willfully resisting it, God would take the steps to ensure that they minimally meet the bare necessary conditions for being in a relationship with them, namely believing that God exists. So we get that second premise. But alas, the third premise is that there is non-resistant non-belief in God. And so, given that if there's a God who's always open to a personal relationship with any finite person, then there is no non-resistant non-belief. But there is non-resistant non-belief. It follows that there is no such God who is always open to a personal relationship with any finite person. And again, if there is a perfectly loving God at all, then God is always open to a personal relationship with any finite person. And so it's going to follow that no perfectly loving God exists. So that's the broad brushstrokes of the argument.
Okay, I think that does require some condensing and some clarification on what he's saying, because this is there's a lot of words there.
There is. I mean, one is that he goes down the loving being root or flavor of divine hiddenness, which is one of the stronger and more common ones, but a lot of people sort of package under the divine hiddenness more the sort of, we can't see him, he doesn't show himself, I believe in him if he shows himself, independent of the love element of the relationship thing. But nevertheless, yeah, it's a decent summary and presentation of it. I think one of the things that clearly shows is these misunderstandings and these sort of ad hoc claims. So given that there is non-resistant non-belief, that's quite a thing to take as a given fact, right? Because I used to, as an atheist, believe I was non-resistant and believe I would follow the truth, where I find it and so on. And I rarely felt that way, but it just simply wasn't true. It wasn't until my eyes were opened and things unlocked that I could look back and then find that in fact I was being resistant. But also there's people who are non-resistant, non-belief, just as we just discussed with the brother previously, who haven't had the message clearly and understood it. And in which case, yeah, that explains non-resistant non-belief. So none of this argument is qualified with and have been presented or engaged with the information such that they would believe while they're in dunya. They might have some fitra type connection of Iman without having clear articulation of a particular belief in God. That's not covered at all. But yeah, it precludes there being people who will make it to Jannah given their own test, but are not on the list of people that Allah sort of convinces or turns their heart towards while they're in dunya, you know. So the whole thing again is just I don't know exactly what concept of God it's supposed to apply to. It's certainly not the Islamic framework.
And here's the thing: this is actually their equivalent of fitra, right? They're basically claiming that the fitra is that you will not accept a God because God doesn't exist. This is right. And in Islam, we actually have a very different concept that every existence, every creation understands that there must be a higher power in charge of this reality. And if that is the case, right, that we know of this intuitively, we don't need to be taught this, right? How do you even address this question of non-resistance, non-belief when you're actively going against that fitra concept? And again, this comes down to epistemology. Right?
Well,
Epistemology
this
really.
is yes. What interesting as well is because some people have the resistance sort of injected into them or put into them, so it's not actually their own active resistance, if that makes sense. You know, some people are brought up in a certain way that puts in resistance. They don't recognize the resistance, you know, exactly like I had before. So, you know, some people will not recognize that they are being resistant or that they are preventing their fitra from, you know, directly validating, you know, what's being said about God and so on. So yeah, it's a very difficult position to hold, really, and what it boils down to is setting up a trap, basically, where the theist, in one way or another, Muslims in particular, will then say, well, you might think you're non-resistant, but actually you are. And they say, you're now thinking you know me better than I know me, or you're disallowing me to, you know, all this sort of stuff. They're setting up a trap where you can be dismissed a completely different way. And I think
Judge, jury, executioner, basically everything in one.
Well, I think Alex makes this point later, although ironically sort of misstates things and or rather makes it clear that that's the trap he intends to use without making that, without realizing that's what he's saying.
He holds this position. He held this position, and this was his go-to argument for quite a while, for a number of years. This was the argument that he would fall back on. I think presentations.
I think it is one of his favorite, and he still brings it up. I think it was before. It's difficult. I mean, he's always known and used the argument from evil. He's always known and used the divine hiddenness. I mean, they are two of the most standard fallbacks, and I think the reason for them really is that both of them work incredibly well against Christian concepts of God, at least insofar as were imported into Europe and understood in Europe during the whole development of this Western analytical philosophy school, right? So it stands to reason, you know, they're developed against a particular concept or conceptual framework, and they work well against that. They just don't apply to Islam, not even a hair's breadth. They just don't. Two things I thought were well worth pointing out is first, he talks of perfectly loving God, and he talks about a reciprocal relationship. How can you have it's not a reciprocal? We're not gods, right? So the way he's conceiving of and thinking about love bears noting. This is a bit wrong. It would be much better to say that he's loving in the perfect way, which is appropriate to the creation, right? And that appropriate relationship is not the same thing as a reciprocal relationship of equals. Reciprocal relationship of equals. It's simply not. It's a different thing. But that sort of slight mischaracterization of God and his relationship to his creation is actually very, very telling. It's subtle and it doesn't really affect the argument as they're going through it, but the fact that's their natural way of looking at it really betrays that they are attacking an entirely different concept of God that comes through the really the Protestant tradition, rather than the one that we hold in Islam. I think I misspoke several times in a row there, and it's probably because I'm starting to get tired. The other interesting point was this willful, culpable resistance, and just to point out that if you take a step towards Allah, then He runs to you, right? This sort of concept, it's not just about Him reaching out to you. It's also about you reaching out to Him. If He's already providing the opportunities and the impetus, then you're already rejecting an invitation to start with. You just might not notice it or see it like that.
Yeah, and here's the thing: if you're rejecting the signs around you, right, the existence of this reality and an explanation of this reality, you're not willing to consider that in light of the existence of God. You're presupposing that God doesn't exist. You're presupposing naturalism. You're ignoring revelation. You're ignoring prophethood. You're ignoring all these signs, and then you're saying that God didn't try to communicate with you. That's the same as somebody speaking on the loudspeaker, right? Calling out you by your name, and you put on headphones, noise canceling headphones, and just saying, I don't hear anyone calling me out, right? I don't hear anybody asking me to come out. I heard nothing. That doesn't work. It's just deluding yourself.
I think a lot of what's really interesting is for example, look at the trees, and the way they work, and look at all the things in nature. It's funny later on. A reason I said that is because Alex specifically calls that out. He says it's like this really sort of naive way of saying, look at the trees, God exists, and then there's like this sort of bell curve, and then where deny it and use all sorts of other arguments and think that's silly, and then right at the top, like the higher intelligences, it becomes a really meaningful statement again. And so he recognizes that, which is good. But I think part of the reason I mentioned that is because that there are all these signs and reasons and impetuses to consider, and ultimately you are offered. Remember, we believe Iblis and his shayateen offer you explanations and promises. And so does Allah. And the question, the test, the very thing is, which do you pick? Because the fact is, both are viable to some degree or another. If you look one way or another way, we believe that the explanations and the promises from God are far more viable, are actually viable, and the ones that come from Iblis and the shayateen are actually broken and rotten and not viable. They just appear to be superficially. And so that this is it. Some people are choosing Allah's explanations and promises, the way he explains things to us, why things are as they are, and what the consequences and results are, and so on. And some people find Iblis's explanations, or the ones generated by the shayateen, more compelling, and that indicts them. But there's no factual basis for this stuff. What does Uno Jing say? We are proof Allah is real. He made us witness His creation. It's just that He showed mercy to Iblis, so it became a test for mankind and jinn. Sahih, correct. It's the only thing that's a shame is that it's or a difficulty, I should say, is that it takes so much to unpack that and explain it to someone from a completely different perspective. But it's very profound, very straightforward. Biggest general proof of the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is. Now, this is one of the interesting things is naturalists will often say they have tons of proof for this, that, and the other. But all of it also stands as proof for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there's plenty of things that stand as proof for Allah that do not stand very well for naturalism, although they don't like it. And so it becomes quite interesting because this is where the double standard we spoke about before comes in, and where this question of what your epistemology is, because a lot of people say there's no evidence for God instead of saying, yeah, there's loads of it. I just don't think it compels me to think of God. I think these other explanations are more compelling. At least that's honest. But a lot of people are willing to take all the complexity, the apparent design, and the fine tuning and all that kind of stuff, and say not that they believe it's evidence for God and evidence for naturalism, but naturalism outweighs it, but to say it's not at all evidence for God because there is an alternative explanation. And as long as an alternative explanation exists, they will jump on that and choose that alternative explanation, no matter how crazy it is. You know, they will, whether it involve aliens that we will never see and have never seen, whether it involve, universes that we'll never get in contact with, whether it involves, stuff to do with quantum dualities they don't understand, or to do with, wormholes and portals, or conformal cyclic cosmology, or quantum fluctuations, in whatever it is. They'll take anything at all, but not God. And then say, as long as someone has come up with something that sounds plausible to them, even if they don't understand it, they take that over God.
Right for you.
Yes, get coffee and say la ilaha illallah.
No, that's just la 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 la.
Well, get coffee was correct, and say la ilaha illallah is the
No. This
what
is
I will do.
That's not what the sister said.
I know it's not what she's saying, but what I will do is drink coffee and then say la ilaha illallah.
Yeah, exactly.
And saying la la la, you're correct, sister. That is what is going in on a lot of people's heads when presented with evidence, although they perceive it not. And I was there. This is the thing. I know what it's like to think that I'm being genuinely fair with the evidences and just not see that I'm being a completely, complete hypocrite and weighing things in this really prejudiced kind of way. I've been there where I'm making arguments over here addressing one set of evidences or problems and a whole different bunch of arguments over here, thinking that my stance works when you can't take both of them together. This is incompatible with this, but I use that here and that there, and just not seeing it. And for everyone else, it was blatant hypocrisy. But for me, I could not understand why anyone would see hypocrisy in it. And it's not until Allah, lifted the veils on my heart and my eyes, that I could see it. It's a very, very strange phenomena. It is very weird. So I think have more compassion sometimes for people in that state who are apparently very disingenuous, but actually maybe more like how I was. Subscribe to Brother Hatim, but didn't find any video. Yes, I'm sorry, I haven't put any videos on yet. I certainly do intend to, inshallah. A brother came forward and said they would help me to get some videos out there. So I will, inshallah. Sorry, can you keep the comment up? Because I didn't...
No. Sure. Right.
Yeah, but I will, inshallah. The thing is, I've got so much going on in my life at the moment. Like behind the scene, life is very, very hard for me at the moment. There is so much going on at all levels.
Yeah,
and inshallah, it will be cleared up, and I'll have some ability to sort of focus and deal with actually building up a channel and a website and contents that I intend to, and books I intend to write, and so on. I'll make it easy soon, inshallah. The video explaining the deconstruction of atheism, as he did on Dawah stream. Yeah, there's actually one. If you go look on Dawah Wise as well, just day before yesterday on Thursday, I did a condensed deconstruction. So I sort of remade the slide deck to be a much shorter slide deck. It still took us over 2 hours to go through. Brother Sabur was there, and Muhammad were there, who both posed excellent questions because they're science geeks as well, and a lot of interesting philosophical points. So the first few hours of that is interesting and worth watching. And I do intend to put some on my own channel as well at some point. I just, at the moment, I don't have the capacity and the time to manage my own channel, but other people have theirs, and I can still sort of spread some good words in support of Islam that way. So that's what I'm doing now. So jazakallah khair, and sorry for not meeting standards just yet. May Allah make things better.
All right. Can we finish up this one? Or I know you're sounding tired.
Yeah, go on. I'm worried about Salah time.
Okay. So we can stop here. We can revisit divine hiddenness on Monday.
Yeah, it's a big one. We should do it justice. I think if we're going to wrap up and do something, we could skip to the stone so heavy, because this one's
Oh,
quite quick and quite funny.
yeah, that's and it's a short one, relatively
Yeah,
speaking.
you know, let's skip to that one, and let's call this the last one to wrap up, inshallah.
All right, let's go through it.
What's next is the dreaded stone paradox.
Oh yes, come
So,
on, S tier.
yeah, oh my goodness. Okay, so Homer Simpson famously, this is, it all goes back to, no, it doesn't go back to Homer Simpson, but he famously asked, could God microwave a burrito so hot that he himself couldn't eat it? And that's basically what we're getting at. I'll put it in terms of the stone because, okay, fine, it's a stone paradox. I like the burrito paradox better. It's much, has a better flavor to it. That was good. That was good.
Zing.
Okay. Yes, that was a good one. Okay. Anyway, the question is, could God create a stone so heavy that he himself could not lift it? If yes, then there's something that God can't do, namely lift the stone. And so God can't be omnipotent. If no, then there's also something God can't do, namely create the stone. And so God can't be omnipotent. Either way, God can't be omnipotent. So an omnipotent being is impossible.
Yes. God is crushed under the weight of this metaphorical rock.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. You talked about omnipotence. I think most people, when they're defining God, do say God is omnipotent. That is sort of all powerful. So one easy way out of this is just to say, oh, I believe in a God who's not omnipotent. Problem solved instantly. He just can't do like all things. Cool, easy, that's fine. But a lot of people want to say, no, God is all powerful. So if God is all powerful, then is this not a paradox, Joe?
I don't think so, no. I mean, we really just have to get clear on what exactly it is to be omnipotent, right?
Exactly.
So the argument here is trying to infer that God is not omnipotent from the fact that God can't do something. But that doesn't follow. Since if something is an impossible task, then God's inability to do it, that's no threat to his omnipotence. I mean, omnipotence, as theists typically understand it, is, to at least a very rough approximation, something like the ability to do whatever is possible.
Yep.
And so if something is impossible, well, then, I mean, of course God can't do it, but it's also no threat to his omnipotence that he can't do it. Because again, omnipotence is just the ability to do whatever's possible.
It's so obvious that, like, if you say, well, omnipotence is the ability to do anything, and you could just think, okay, well then, can God do an impossible thing? Well, hold on. Yes? No, we can't do something that's impossible. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? And so instantly it's just this paradox. And that's so sort of obvious and self-defeating that this can't be what we mean by omnipotence. Like you say, a good definition of omnipotence is the ability to do anything that's possible. So God can't make a square with 3 sides. But as you say, that's not a threat to his omnipotence because it's just something that's not possible. This does, at least, somewhat uncomfortably maybe, put like restrictions on God. It seems like there are these things called logical laws which sort of constrain God and what he can do. Like if God really wanted,
All right, let's stop this one.
A triangle that had 2 sides, like he just sort of could.
This is a really, really important point and very interesting because I think, again, the Islamic concept is uniquely, protected from this, in that for us, it's not that there is this thing, logical laws, that constrains Allah in some way. It's that Allah is a certain way and acts in accordance to how he is, and he has told us how he is. And so it's like he's created the preserved tablet, right? It's the preserved tablet. So you can't then say it's a limitation on his power that he can't unpreserve the preserved tablet. It's not in any way a limitation on what he could do or could have done. It's except in a very disingenuous way of using that word limitation. It's similar to saying once Allah has created something,
Mhm.
Well, he can no longer possibly be in the state of having never created anything. And so he's limited. He can't make it the case that he never created something after it's the fact that he created something. Haha, limitation on God. It's absurd, right? But it's not that. So some people do, I think, mistakenly take the state where he can only do possible things, because the criteria for possibility is our understanding. It could well be that he shows us things that are beyond our understanding, that there's things that appear to be impossible to us, but that are actually possible for him. So we always have to keep that humility gap in place. And I think that's really important. I mean, here's an interesting one, actually. I think he said a square with three sides.
Yeah.
Well, if you
Every
take
square has three sides.
yeah, I mean square, but if you take a quadrilateral, quadrilateral is defined as having four sides, and ask for a three-sided quadrilateral. On one hand, that's a contradiction. On the other hand, if you take one of the sides and you reduce its length indefinitely, well, then eventually, according to the normal mathematical rules we're talking about, it becomes a point. But that it's always a delta x of length. But at some point, we also call it that it reaches this limit of no longer really being a side, and so it can be viewed as being a quadrilateral triangle in some sense, or to some approximation. So we've got to be really careful about. One thing is to say, look, by definition, something a triangle is something with three sides. And therefore anything that has a different number of sides is by definition just not that thing. So it's not about not being able to make it or it not being able to come into existence. It's just about it would have a different definition. It would have a different name. There's nothing mysterious or interesting about that. And I don't think they do a good job of pulling those things apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things I like to point out is that these laws, so-called laws of logic, and these are descriptive of our reality, not really prescriptive of our reality, right? This is not prescribing what God can or can't do. It's describing what He does, and He's the way He's created this reality.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of putting it. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And again, remember what I said near the beginning and in the stream on Dalways a couple of days ago. The laws of logic come out of the Quran, straightforwardly.
Exactly.
The three
Yep.
laws of logic. However, they also come together with limitations on humans' ability to use them and where it's appropriate to use them, and the alternative kind of types and approaches of logic that we need to use in other cases, and so on and so on. It's way more detailed than that. And so it's interesting because Alex takes the laws of logic basically as given by Aristotle, and that they're somehow fundamental, on really not much more than that. On the fact they've been used everywhere, and so on and so forth. But in another podcast he does with another one of his friends, they talked about essentially the impossibility of trying to ground the most fundamental things in logic. How do you ground the implication error? How do you ground the law of identity? And it's just interesting to me that they're grounded in Islam, and even they require grounding in Islam, and the grounding is provided in the Quran.
Yeah.
But they have them separately grounded.
All right, let's
Couldn't do it, even if he really, really wanted to. I mean, in a sense, Joe, and that might seem like a strange thing to want, but like, I would love genuinely to see like a triangle with four sides. Like, wouldn't you love to see? Like, that would be awesome. Like, if I said, dude, I've got this triangle with four sides, I've drawn it on a piece of paper, do you want to see it? You'd be like, yes, I want to see that. That sounds like the most interesting thing in the world. So for God, who can do anything, he must be like, what? How fascinating it would be.
I just described how it would work.
With like,
sorry.
Just a quick one. It's not that fascinating. I just described one way it could work, which is using calculus, and some people may call that cheating, and that'll be an interesting discussion as to the reality of completed infinities. But yeah, let's carry on.
Yeah.
Like four sides, but he can't do it. And so it seems like God is like constrained in a way that might make some theists uncomfortable.
I love Joe's response.
I'm kind of at a loss for words and how to respond. I mean, I don't know. Okay, sure. I think it'd be interesting if, I mean, obviously I'd want to see it because I'd want to point out where exactly you're going wrong and where exactly you're kind of confusing yourself. I mean, I wouldn't want to see it because I think it'd be like awesome to have that power. I don't think it's awesome to have that power because I think it's impossible to have that power. So if something has that power, then it's just an impossible being. An impossible being that, that's not a great being. I mean, it's impossible. So I think
Yeah.
I think what they'd say is like, no, God isn't more awesome or better if he like has the power to do these impossible things, because that would require that God is impossible. And that wouldn't make God better. So I don't know. I don't see
Also,
much plausibility here.
The
Agreed.
reason why it would be so cool to see a four-sided triangle is because it's impossible. If I just showed you it and you were like, oh right, it would suddenly become a lot less interesting. I think is the thing that's fun about it is that it's like, what the hell are you talking about, man? I don't even understand. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, one helpful way of thinking about this, I've got a friend who talks about things existing both in the intellect and in reality. Like a unicorn exists, it just sort of exists in the mind, right? And there's a sense in which like the word unicorn has a referent, and in the same way that like Sherlock Holmes seems to have a referent. Like when I say Sherlock Holmes, there's a sort of thought that attaches to, in a way that all of the characters that Arthur Conan Doyle never wrote about and no one ever wrote about don't seem to have a referent. They seem to even if like Sherlock Holmes doesn't exist, the characters that were never dreamt of by any author seem to exist even less, if you know what I mean. And so there's sort of like levels of existence. There's existence in the mind and existence in reality. And the way he thinks about this is to say that, yeah, God can do all things. It's just that logical contradictions just aren't things. They're literally like not things. Like a square triangle is just not a thing. It's just not a thing. It doesn't have a referent. Even in the mind, it literally just doesn't attach itself to any real thing, any real thought, any real concept, any real object, like nothing. And so God can do literally all things. It's just that, like, when you say, can he create a rock so heavy he can't lift it? Or like a triangle that's got four sides, that's just not a thing, man. It's literally not. There's nothing that thought can attach to as a referent.
Maybe. And maybe there's something to that. I don't know. It seems to be resting on assumptions that I don't like, that they're like...
Sorry, go ahead.
Are they near the rating bit yet? Because I mean, this is basically just reiterating the...
Yeah, it's just about a couple of minutes.
All right, go on,
I don't know, different kinds of existence or different like ways of existing, or like different like degrees of existence or something, which I'm very much opposed to that. I even have a hard time understanding what that could possibly amount to. I just think something either exists or it doesn't, and there's just one univocal sense of existence that applies to everything. Either there's zero of something, so like there are zero unicorns, or there's more than zero, and that's all that I mean when I say that, like, unicorns exist. Like there's more than zero, and there's more than zero of them, right? So
well, no, I don't know about that, because would you say that spatial extension exists?
Well, I think spatial extension would be a property of things, and
which exists.
whether or not I think properties exist, I mean, I tend to lean towards thinking properties exist, like redness exists. I tend to lean
so like
that way,
how many rednesses are there? I mean, there's either 0 redness or there's like 2 redness or 3 redness, right?
No, there's only one property of redness, and it's what all red things share in common. That's probably... Anyway, we don't need to get bogged down into metaphysics. We've got the argument on our hand, and
sure.
In my view,
basically, what I'm saying is, I think I like this argument more than you do. I don't think it works, but I think it's got a bit more like room for fun than I think maybe you're giving it credit for. I think that like the idea of there being constraints on God is fun to think about. The idea of what exactly that means, the sort of the slightly condensed definition of omnipotence that at least requires some kind of debate. You might sort of stop a theist in their tracks for 5 minutes to be like, well, can he do everything, or just all possible things? Do impossible things exist? And if so, are they things that God can't do? Like, it's sort of it's a thinker to some degree.
Yeah, and it definitely it's.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna point out something here. This is the way this was presented. It's very telling. In what their approach is versus what our approach is. For us,
Mm.
this is a question of salvation. This is a question of eternal life. This is a question of a very serious, a very sincere, a very honest um, inquiry into what are we here for.
Mm.
And you can tell that this is just a game. When they're the way they're approaching it, this is just a
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, it's for fun, which is very very interesting when you go back to what we started discussing regarding divine hiddenness,
Mhm.
because they might not think they're being defiantly resistant, but if they enjoy this game so much and actually coming down on a decision takes the game away, because you can no longer poke fun at God and make different versions of him and
Mhm.
play around with it at your will, because now it has real meaning and now it really affects your thoughts and actions. Now it's not just a game. Well, that wanting to not let go of that is also this kind of hidden resistance that they might
Yeah.
not admit to, but they're clearly showing that they enjoy this stuff. They enjoy the freedom you have to think along these lines without being, when you're not committed to a belief, that
Yeah.
you can still process when you're committed to a belief, but it might not be so enjoyable anymore.
Yeah.
Like for
And
me, I used to enjoy a bunch of this stuff and ideas, but when I came to believe and it became really serious, it's sickening to say or hear some of the things they're saying. It's
yeah.
just it's reading something so deep, just so blithely, just
And for our audiences, I just want to point out, if you see this type of individual who's taking this as a game, it's just fun, right? That's a discussion that you need to remove yourself from, because the two of you are not on equal footing. There's You're probably having this discussion in good faith. They're having this discussion no longer in good faith. There is no meaning behind it. This is just a game to them.
But
The
before you go,
argument.
do make the point that for you it is very important, and you're
Mhm.
you're not asking them to just have reverence because it's important to you. You're saying that this is a critically important field of thought and study, and it's not a game, and you won't treat it as a game. So either you keep engaging, but it's not taken as a game, or you're going to have to disengage. But definitely, as
Mhm.
Brother Faisal said, don't engage with it and continue with it when it's become clear to them that it's kind of some portion of it's for fun or it's just part of engagement. Especially with my autism, sometimes it's really really frustrating for me
Mhm.
when I let's say I researched something into substantial detail, and then someone else has just like read a single news article on it, and they want the conversation to just be, what do you think, what do I think, and it's just a bat things forward and backwards kind of discussion, and it's just a sort of a social function, and who cares about what's really true, and actually you're a bit of a knob if you're the one who thinks you're right. All those kind of discussions are just meaningless. It's if they're having a discussion because they want to know, they want to get to the truth, they want to evaluate criteria, they want to evaluate perspectives and proofs and things, then yeah, or all that power to you. But they really need to be taking this stuff seriously, and if they're not,
Yeah.
then they're spoken about in the Quran. They don't take this stuff in jest.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had discussions with people um, who they would uh, they would always say the sweetest thing. No, no, no. I totally respect this about your religion. I do this, I do that, right? But then they fall back into this type of argumentation.
Uh,
They'll jump around different topics, that as soon as you've started even partially responding to something that they brought up, they'll bring something else up. It's that shotgun tactic that they use, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
identify those sort of situation, because, like Alex was saying here, this is just sort of a stopover. as soon as this argument gets responded to, he knows that there are good responses to this argument, right? And it's a non-argument. We'll see it pretty much, right? Then for to bring forward a non-argument, does it what does it show about you, right? It just shows that you know something to be untrue. You're placing it in front of someone just to sort of rattle them up, and then because you've been able to shake them up a bit, right? Use it as a debate tactic. You're going to bring forth another argument and then another one, just to sort of argue, not really have a discussion.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, and some people are doing it because they enjoy it. Some people are doing it because it's part of this validation for themselves, and it's very toxic in another way. And a lot of people will think that because think they're being respectful, and actually say a load of really disgusting things. About it's like when someone discusses like evil God. Like this is, you can't attribute this to Allah. Like if you want to invent up some evil deity or something else or whatever, that's a separate thing if you wish. But don't like say, what about Allah but change such and such an attribute? Disgusting. No, like this is, it's not, it's just not legitimate. Like you might think you're being respectful and intellectual, but you're not. This is not respectful. And then it can get worse and worse. And if you point out that it's not being respectful, sometimes they feel that you're not then being respectful to them because their belief is that they should be free to do such and such. Like doing disgusting cartoons of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? They use this all the time, and it's just to lay some ad hominem against the Muslims and to lay some dirty attacks because they say, well, you're not respectful of me because you don't respect my right to disrespect you, or you call this disrespectful. So anyway, I'm going into that too much, but there we go.
Yeah.
Go on. We've really got to finish. I've just got to run and pray.
Yeah. So I think
it spurs interesting philosophical reflection on what exactly it is to be omnipotent and our analysis of omnipotence. In short, we want to have an analysis or an account of what it is to be omnipotent that doesn't succumb to the paradox. And I guess it has philosophical utility in that regard. And so for that reason, I wouldn't put it in the F tier. Because it has philosophical utility, as you're saying, and like spurring thoughts and helping people refine their notion of omnipotence. But in terms of like an argument for atheism, which listen, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking E tier. Okay, so right above F.
Might say that.
Yeah, right above F.
I think that's fair, especially because got like the concept of omnipotence is quite a strange one. I mean, like. Obviously, religious traditions have always described God as like all powerful, this kind of stuff. But this like really philosophical, analytic sort of concept. I mean, everything we're doing here is quite inappropriate, really. We're talking about this God, this being that we're supposed to relate to, who reveals himself through narratives and peoples and nations and all kinds of stuff. And we're sort of like, yes, but does he fulfill the necessary and sufficient criterion of being able to, if P is the set of all possible things, does it, that kind of crap just feels like a bit inappropriate. So like against this like religious tradition, and also against the fact that someone can just say omnipotence just means the ability to do all possible things, and against the position that somebody could say, yeah, well, maybe omnipotence is like a slightly lesser quality than we had it, than we thought, or maybe God isn't omnipotent. There's just like so many reasons to be like, this should remain both on the sort of Twitter feeds of cringe atheist meme pages and also in the E tier.
Yes. I mean, in terms of like whether or not it succeeds, like I would have...
That is the rating it gets. Cringe atheist meme.
Exactly.
Argument. So do show this section to atheists who come and think it's clever to present the burrito too hot argument.
Yeah, burrito too hot, or I mean that not a lot of people know about the burrito too hot, but definitely the rock argument, the stone argument.
I thought more people would know the Simpsons than know the rock these days, but there we go.
Yeah, exactly. All right. It's been 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Roughly twice as long as it was supposed to be. We can't be doing 4 hours and then doing that 3 days a week as well.
Yeah. All right.
Remember, people want me to put some videos on my own channel as well.
Yeah. Oh, Monday we're back, but it will
Inshallah.
be a shorter stream, inshallah. Right. We will have. So it will be the mornings for now, because other times are taken up by other channels. We're not trying to take away time from some of the other ones. We just want to make sure that people get educated about some of these when it comes to atheism and how to discuss these atheist arguments, right? That you have the knowledge and the capacity to deal with them if something comes up. Any last words?
No, not really. I think I've said enough, and I really have to go pray
All right.
before it's too late.
Okay.
So that's
I'll-
my most important thought out of all of this, and maybe there is something in that, is that the salah is more important than anything that we've been
Exactly.
discussing. So make sure you don't miss that. And yeah, for everything else, feel free to drop an email if you've got the stick it up there if you want to get in contact and discuss stuff. Maybe you're an atheist, but you don't like to, do things live, and you're, whatever. Fine, let's do that. Particularly if you're science-based. I believe in science, physics people who respect that kind of thing. Go for it. But for now, I'll let you wrap up because I really have to go and pray.
Yeah, sure. I'm just gonna put up your email here as well. Okay, so cogent.faith@pm.me. All right. And for everyone who's looking for something, I'll wrap up if you are okay with it.
I better go. You wrap
Right.
up and say your
Alrighty.
thoughts. And catch you later. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. All right. So just for everyone, remember our brother Yemeni, right, on Yemenite front. He has Rihatul Arab. If you've not already visited the shop online, please go ahead. Some really good stuff up there, right? So have a look. And everybody deserves to smell better than they do. So please have a look at the shop, and you always have the code for 15% off. If you're a regular, if you're coming on to Dotstream, you have the opportunity to use Dot's 15 discount code at the website. Okay, with this, I would just remind our everyone to remember our brothers and sisters around the world, Palestine, in Sudan, in Kashmir, in China, in Myanmar, right, who are going through troubled times, that Allah makes it easy for them, that Allah accepts their sacrifices, and Allah accepts and raises their levels in Jannah. Ameen. With this, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'll see you guys on Monday.